Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of By the Numbers, the quintessential Counter-Strike podcast. I'm your host, Richard Lewis. Joining me, as he always does, is Duncan Thorin Shields. How are you doing, Duncan?
Not bad. Everything's all right, I think.
Yeah.
Not one of those shows where I just start angry before the show's even begun.
Good. I'm glad. We're going to need that poise, I think, for this one, because obviously we do talk about everything that's been going on in Counter-Strike, and one story is, really sort of dominated the space at the moment, and it revolves around a co-worker. So it's always difficult to sort of talk about because it's somebody we know and, have worked with and associated with outside of work, right? But obviously we're going to have to go into the Sadokist story. Now, listen,
as we would if it was anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth saying. So, in my mind, the way I thought about this was maybe we do it at the end and we talk about the roster swaps first, just in case it goes south. I don't know, but fuck it. Let's just start with it.
I don't think anything's going to go south, man. I'm not worried about these things.
Well, I don't know. I think we're going to disagree.
Oh, no problem with that.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if people are aware of this, but you are allowed to actually disagree with people and just have a conversation with them,
I know.
It doesn't seem like it nowadays. Apparently it doesn't exist, but I've done it plenty of times with people who are friends of mine.
All right. So look, for those who missed it, I don't know how you'd be watching this podcast and not know about it. There's obviously a commentator called Sadokist. He partners with Henry G, works a lot of events. For many people, he is considered the most talented commentator we have in Counter-Strike, and therefore, by extension, esports. And he turned 29 recently, and he went out and decided to have a drink, as one does on their birthday. And then he decided to have a live AMA stream on Twitch while inebriated, which isn't to offer any excuses, but just to state the facts, because for some reason, if you say that he was inebriated...
Okay, I don't want... Well, here's the thing. I'll let you break down this. Just give the facts first, and then I'll say something. But I'll put a pin in that one. I'm going to remember this.
Sure. Yeah, but it's obviously worth just noting at this juncture.
Sure.
I am not saying that being inebriated makes anything okay. I am just stating the fact that he was inebriated. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of publications saying, well, if you acknowledge that he's drunk, you're making it. I'm not doing that, but he had been
actually, it would be a part of the journalistic ethics to mention the context of what happened, especially if someone was on a mind-altering drug.
Yeah.
That would be part of a journalist's ethics, in fact.
Yeah. So it has to be put out there whether people want to do that or not. And then during the course of that broadcast, he said several things, which included telling somebody they had a personal disagreement with, that he would celebrate their death.
Another thing, Richard, which again was not reported in a number of these stories.
Sure.
All facts that just don't need to be mentioned, I guess.
And it's what I mean, that there was definitely a lot of context missing from the reporting, but the key stumbling block in all of that is that for this one instance, at least for me, I'm not sure how much it matters, in the fact that he used the N-word. And also, we're in the unenviable position of having to have a nuanced discussion about words, language, and its impact without being able to use any of the words, because, those are the times. He used the N-word, and it was used very much as a pejorative. It wasn't like the Ninja situation where it was lyrics singing along to a song. It wasn't used, but, it doesn't matter how it wasn't used. It was simply used as an insult to somebody else.
I'll tell you what, that's an interesting detail in itself, right, Richard? If there was a story that said someone used a racial slur and that's where they just ended the sentence, I'd say, but you're missing half the sentence there. Who did they use it towards? Oh, we don't need to know. Nobody needs to know ever. Well, how would I know if it's a racial slur then?
Well, so, see, this is where I think initially our opinions will diverge.
Here's the thing, though. They won't on one level, Richard, because I know for a fact that you are not someone who thinks, for example, that black people, African-American people cannot use that word.
No,
so it's incredibly important to know the context of who said it.
Oh,
I'm just saying this is reporting, This is, again, never reported in the story. It's just, remember, the story was just, basically, this is the story that everyone reported. Sadokist says N-word. And then you're lucky if you got a couple more details. Maybe you got, it was his birthday. Maybe, you got all that, it's a stream, obviously. You got a detail saying that he said that someone who was, it depends on the story, either a fan or a viewer should kill themselves. It's almost like people purposely omitted the actual information in this story. And yet the most basic job of the journalist here is report the facts, then put in anything else. Yeah, put in additional, but you got to at least get the facts on paper, right?
Sure. So with the facts on paper.
Like, do you actually know who he said it to? I'm not claiming to, by the way.
No. Right? No, he said it to a friend he lent across.
His friend
while he
said
was
something
playing
about
a game.
him with his casting, and then he said, "I'm only at 50% now, and I'm already the best." Is this the context, right?
Yes, and then
right. That's important to know, mate. I'm not joking. I can't see that stream because it's deleted, so I wasn't. Which, by the way, goes into the fact that the whole community having a tantrum that we're not tweeting about while we're all asleep is beyond mentally ill. But anyway, in this scenario, I've read about 10 news posts that still don't know that basic piece of information. It's pretty outrageous.
Yeah, sure. But let's before we even expand upon the point, let's talk about that instance, right? That incident, the use of the M word. Now I'll give you my opinion on it. So, like, I fucking hate the use of the word. Like, just real talk. Like, it's not something that's in my vernacular. Despite what people want to say about me, I've had to eat shit for fucking 3 years and been called a racist and everything else. I, don't use the word. I don't like the word. I've never liked the word, especially when it's being used kind of as an insult, because historically, when you look at what the word exists for and its primary function, it was to classify and typify non-white people. All right. And that's even before we get into, the abomination of slavery and everything else. It predates that by hundreds of years. But it was used to basically assign a classification to non-white people, and tacitly within that classification, personality archetypes, genetic archetypes, and very often, more often than not, an implication that those archetypes were inferior to white people. Now, yes, if you go back to its origins, it is just a linguistic extension of the word to mean black, negro. It's just
literally the word from like fucking Spanish or something, isn't it?
Yes.
Or Portuguese, whichever one of the two.
Yeah, I believe it was Portuguese it originated from initially. Its first recorded instance. But somewhere along the line, it actually became a way to sort of state that these types of people have these types of qualities. And that right there is something that's so sort of like, I don't know, I just cannot get on board with it. And I've heard people, I've heard a lot of like free speech absolutists and, fucking comedians and people down the years, friends, colleagues, people who've said, why do we give this word all this power? Why don't we just remove the power and everybody says it and then it's all going to be okay? But I don't ever think, certainly not in my lifetime, we're going to be so far removed from the roots of the word, and the word only really exists in a modern context to denigrate black people. That's the only reason it's ever entered into the common vernacular, which is why black people wanted to reclaim it when their cultural movement started breaking out and becoming mainstream. I don't understand why anybody would use it as a pejorative, because even if you use it as a pejorative, loaded within that there is this word that used to be used by racists to demonize black people, and you are saying it to someone as an insult, therefore implying they have the same qualities as those people. And that's only negative. So I have always had an issue with it. I've done lots of work in like the FGC. You don't hear it. I'm not saying we hear it all the time in CS. I'm not saying you hear it all the time in general on the internet, and certainly not with people I associate with. I've never heard Matt use it before, or even speak like that before, I might add. But I just wanted to say right off the bat, I don't understand why so many people want to go and fight for the right to use this word. I do not understand why that is a fight worth having. It has never made sense to me. It's not a word I want to use. It's not something I feel is important for me personally.
All right, here's the problem with all that you just said there. Okay. If that was like some sort of an opening remarks for some kind of degree level discussion about linguistics and the way words are used over history, it'd all be dynamite, mate. But nobody listening right now, first of all, probably knew even 80% of what you just said there. They knew little bits and pieces, or they had a sense of it, or they knew the big broad strokes. And yet what happens in all scenarios to do with taboo topics is people try to come up with as many ways to interpret what you've done and said as negative as possible. And they will be as uncharitable as possible. So, for example, within you saying all that, I'm going to go ahead and guess you don't think that Sadokist knows about the Portuguese origins of that word and the implicit historical context of what slavery meant, etc., and that in saying that he thought all that in his mind and said, right, yes, send on that email to it'd be a ludicrous implication, right? Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean that would
never be the context he used it in, right?
No, I mean, but the way I would say it is, I think we all know inherent within using the word, because it's very much at the forefront of our thinking. We all know where that word comes from. We all know which people it's used to describe and denigrate.
Sure, but this is an extremely important point, I think, which is that one thing that tilts me about people who talk about like words you are not allowed to use is they just move the goalposts all day long. So what happens is they can use a word that, here's a great example, Richard. So by that exact logic, it doesn't matter, even if in the future 1,000 racists use Pepe the Frog every day of their life to represent a racist symbol, it will never be racist because the origins were not racist and that was not the original cultural context. And so by the logic you have just presented, it could never be a racist symbol. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't say that. What I would say is symbols and language change over time. And what's very important is, A, what is the cultural context for that person? So, by the way, immediately, it's different for people in America than it would be in China, for example. That would be a very different cultural context. Then you've got to add in the aspect of what that person themselves meant. I know that's apparently no longer what anyone wants to ever discuss in any of these scandals, which is what was the actual intention of the person who said the words? What were they trying to communicate? Instead, what we do is we say, since it's they keep saying what you said there, Richard, indefensible, inexcusable. They constantly try to police that you cannot give any context to what the person did. You'll notice the number one reason they want to say that is because they want to exclude things like the person was intoxicated, the person was letting loose, the person wasn't talking to a black person and in a way to denigrate them. The reason they want to exclude all that, mate, is to give as uncharitable interpretation as possible. Because here's what this discussion always devolves into. And this is how utterly pathetic modern day discussion about language is. It comes down to, was what he said offensive to some people? And if the answer is yes, somehow that's the end of the discussion. And then therefore, if they want to give him basically the death penalty, it's fine. And if you say it was offensive, you're not allowed to then go, but what should we really do about this? Should he just get a slap on the wrist? Should we have something in place? You're not allowed to do that, mate. As soon as you've done that, they consider it ceded ground. It's offensive. Therefore, they can go to the nth degree and they can punish you as much as possible. Like, that's the part I don't get about this. I don't know anyone who was arguing it wasn't offensive. I don't really know that I saw anyone do that. Maybe some very naive person goes along the lines of what you're saying, like, maybe for obviously for political comedic reasons, we should be allowed to use this word. Okay, that's a really kind of an abstract discussion. It doesn't really have that much to do with this exact application of what Sadokist said. So I don't really know. For me, it's a straw man that there was two sets of people. There's the people really against racism. And you can tell they're against racism, Rich, because 10 times in every sentence, they tell you that they're not a racist. They actually think they are bragging by saying they don't use the N-word publicly. Did you notice that was like a common trend? Sure. And then on top of that, they will then mention that it's indefensible. They don't want to hear any context. Doesn't matter if you're half alcohol. People will make all kinds of wild statements. Like some of the ones I saw, Richard, were unreal. Like the notion that they have never said anything while drunk that's reprehensible. The notion that if you say a word publicly now, you must use it all the time. Well, you know what's mad about that, Richard? People are obviously going to say I'm lying here because they'll think I have implicit bias because I'm not even actually really friends with Sadokist, but I'm acquaintances with him. But I have been around Sadokist many times in private and in public drunk. And actually, in the context of all of our group, I think he's actually said the least outrageous shit of anyone I can think of. In fact, his way of doing things normally is more to get a bit aggro and maybe like if people fuck with him, like sort of get a bit pushy. That's sort of his way to act up. You know, he's not even really the one who'd say like some edgy shit, which leads into the other aspect here, which is why I said, what is the context of him saying it and who is he saying it to? It would be basically, unless you don't know him, in which case, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. It would be beyond uncharitable to say that he's doing it to explicitly put down black people and remind them that they are property and exactly what they were hundreds of years ago, and, you know, make this statement that can never be brought back from. No, in reality, what I would have to guess he did is say something outrageously edgy with all his inhibition taken away by alcohol and go too far, clearly, and say something that I don't think anyone really agrees you probably should say, beyond, as we've said, comedians or people who believe in special types of free speech, which they want to protect, and they have sort of good reasons for doing it. Like, what they're basically saying is, I'd do it in a context which wasn't all the things you just said, wasn't all that horrible, which is not in any way what Sadokist could pretend to be doing, which is why I'm not going down that route. But my point here is, like, I'll give you another analogy, like I did with the Pepe one. Right, this is one of the things where I actually don't believe, Richard. Okay, I'm actually not someone who takes people's statements at face value. When people who are like extreme leftists say that the internet is a haven of millions of Nazis, I'm not talking about even when they just say everyone's a Nazi. No, they mean literal. Everyone who ever posts a swastika or a stupid meme or makes a joke like that famous one where they voted for Dr. Pepper's new slogan to be like Hitler did nothing wrong or whatever. They actually literally try to imply those people are real Nazis. And if you let them do anything more than that, and in fact, even what they're doing now, that will naturally lead to some sort of Nazi uprising, which will become political, and they always imply violent. Now, the reason why I know that is utterly ludicrous is because I come from the gaming culture. I come from nerd culture. I have been on the internet a lot longer than most of the people talk about that. And in subcultures where it was young males, usually from... this is one of the rare times you can actually use the term privileged backgrounds, as in they don't really have like money problems or issues in their life. And therefore to them, everything is a joke. And so in this space, which especially 20 years ago was unpoliced, it was a Wild West. You never thought anyone would ever connect what you said to who you are as a real person. And even more so, you never thought 20 years later someone would be able to document that and bring it up and it might affect your personal life, your social life. It really was an area where almost explicitly people's jokes will veer into taboos because they cannot express those taboos in their real life and society. So within that is almost a context that when you do that joke there, unless you are a real racist, the joke always was that if you say that, you would never, for example, okay, we all know there's a word beginning with F, which gamers love even more than the word I just mentioned before, and actually, which you yourself have argued, I'd say quite well, has a changing history throughout time related to certainly homosexual people and a slur. Now, in this scenario, almost everyone I know who actually used that word never knowingly said it to a gay person. Most of them wouldn't say if it was a gay person and it was just, you know, they met a gay person. They would never say that online. 99% of the people doing it were doing it, one, to be edgy because they know you're not supposed to say it, and two, with a word like that, because to them the context isn't all the things you just mentioned. They never lived a life where they met a gay person or a black person. They've never seen someone be put down by these slurs, etc. Now, all of this is only very tangentially connected to Sadokist, because I would imagine with his age, he has been around the world. He knows some of these things, but I would just say, for me, it's a pretty open and shut case. Someone said something that definitely in their position as a professional commentator, you cannot say publicly. That's just a fact. It's not to do with whether it's moral or whether we should be, you know, whether this should be like a statement of racism. You're just not allowed to say that. So then the question for me becomes, what's like a reasonable punishment within the context of what's happened? Which is why I've made very clear case that you shouldn't say things like, it's indefensible, there's no context can possibly be given to justify it. That doesn't mean don't give the context though, does it? Like, why would anyone say that, you know? Someone could be, like, you know when people say that term, indefensible, You know, when you've murdered 10 people and there's all the DNA evidence, you don't go, I won't bother with a lawyer because it's indefensible. No, because the lawyer could still explain that. You have mental problems. You're under a lot of stress. Your wife just left you last week. And you know what? You will still go to prison, but your sentence might be less. It's actually incredibly important that person has a defense, has someone who plays devil's advocate, who tries to give the context of the scenario. So the problem with this discussion, as you said, is it's very difficult to actually get into nuance without idiots who are disingenuous trying to say that we basically support use of the N-word if we somehow say he shouldn't be hung, drawn, and quartered, right?
Yeah, and this is one of the issues, right? So you talked that there's a lot of points to pick up on that. First thing I will do is I think one of the least helpful things is people sort of doing like armchair psychology. And I've seen some absolutely absurd assertions that, for example, well, if you've said it in this one instance, you must say it all the time. For example, that's one of the common pieces of knowledge. As somebody that's been around Sadokist, as you said, we've been drinking together, we've hung out together. I have never heard him use it before. And frankly, if he had used it before, I would have definitely called him out on it, because I've called numerous people out on it when they've said it privately, trying to joke around, even within the context of edgy jokes. I don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable, frankly. So, it's not like any of that wisdom applies to Matt at all. Honestly, it's like I can tell you from the reaction among the talent the day it happened, it wasn't like we all went, of course he bloody said that. We were all fucking shocked, right? I mean, nobody expected that to come out of his mouth on a stream on Twitch. But the other thing I'll say is,
especially by the way, because he said it in such a light-hearted manner. Like, as you said, I didn't actually know the context, but if he was saying it to his friend who was with him, he said it in a really bizarre context as well. Here's the thing: let's say I could somehow edit that like the scumbag would, and instead what I did was, when the DonHaci thing came up and someone referenced him, if he'd have said it in that context, that would even have made more sense. Because as I referenced also earlier, people were incredibly dishonest and disingenuous with how they reported that aspect, as though this was just a random viewer and he told them to kill themselves. Not in any way. Again, that's not even uncharitable. That's just factually inaccurate on all levels.
And we'll get into that in a moment.
We'll put a pin in that.
Yeah, for sure. But look, so, I mean, I definitely want to say, though, and I'll ask you a question at the end of this. So the first thing, off the back of what you said, is the reason I think this is a particularly, bad thing to have happened, is that, okay, I know esports is a very welcoming space now as we move into the mainstream more than ever. Everybody's welcome. Everybody can get along together. There's no like judgmental politics. Like, people keep trying to insert that shit into it. But I know everybody here, like, generally, like the vast majority of people I've met through esports, they're not prejudiced. On the internet, you generally don't even know who somebody is. You meet them over a period of time without really knowing any details about them. You form relationships where not everything is put out to the forefront. And then when you get to know people, it's like, when you exist in a sort of digital space like that, none of that stuff matters. Like, everybody is welcome, whatever your background, whatever the culture, whatever your gender, whatever your sexuality, trans status, whatever. Now, if you're Sadokist and you're using an insult like that on a fucking Twitch broadcast, you've got there's a number of issues with that. The first is, there is no getting away from the fact that by using that word as an insult, even to a friend, you are saying that person embodies some negative qualities. We all know the exact wording of what he said. It's because you're and then N-word.
It's the same context as the KNG scenario. Even if he can say something like, there's nothing wrong with being gay, except in his case, actually, I guess he didn't literally use a slur, but the implication's the same. I mean, what's the diss? How are you dissing me if it's a good thing? That's what you're saying, basically. Yes,
exactly. Like, the implication is that if we accept that the N-word is going to be inextricably linked to the history of black people, and black people have been called that word, and then you call somebody who isn't black that word as an insult, and you are therefore saying they embody the qualities, well, that's fucking outrageous, isn't it? I mean, that's
sure, yeah.
You can't.
One of the worst things you can say.
Yeah, you legitimately cannot really explain that away. But then on top of that, right? Let's just say that a black person is watching a CS broadcast, right? And after this, how can he listen to Matt's commentary and think, well, no, listen, hear me out.
Yeah.
Hear me out. How can he listen to Matt's commentary without thinking, well, this dude doesn't like people like me?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, is this the question?
Yeah, well, no, that isn't even the question. But fuck it, I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
Like, how is a black person now?
This is a really important point. Okay, I'll tell you how he could know that. He could read Sadokist's apology. Because here's the thing.
Which we are going to get to.
In a space which is not inclusive and which actually is implicitly exclusive, like it wants to keep out certain people, Sadokist would never have to apologize for this. Because if gamers are all racists and misogynists, then anyone who makes racial or misogynistic comments, we would all just go, yeah, it's not that bad. It's no problem. Don't bother punishing him. Just let him go. It's all right. Now, did that look like the reaction that happened to you? I saw 99% of people baying for the guy's blood and wanting much more by getting whipped up into the outrage culture that we all know, where it's like a mob mentality. You want to see blood. In fact, I even saw loads of people who are in the industry who, for the sake of their own careers, by the way, would be better off just saying nothing, imply like this is unacceptable, like something should be done about this. This was proof that the whole scene does not accept that term and that it is not rife within the community, either publicly or privately, quite frankly. That you can see there's skin in the game to show that is not the case. So there's one way you could do it, because this is one thing that tilts me about all these scenarios again, Richard, is that if you asked me to describe a really racist person, right, first of all, about the first 10 things I'd run through that they could do would all be actual acts. They would deny someone a job. They would attack someone. They would perhaps do something physical to someone. All these things, right? Yeah, then I would start to list off things you could do. Like you could denigrate someone. You could refuse to listen to someone because they're of a certain race. Now, if at the end of it, at the bottom of the list of the things you could do to be racist would be one time jokingly to someone who is not of that race, use that slur. And then here's the caveat: don't apologize for it. If you apologize for it, like at the end of the day, mate, I could go and kill someone in my car now with manslaughter accidentally while drunk. And in about, let's say, off the top of my head, 4 years with like good behavior, I'd be out of prison. And legally, you're not supposed to reference that anymore. I have served my time. But you can say a word, and even if you apologize profusely, sometimes even more than perhaps it even warrants, depending on what the scenario is. I'm not talking about this particular case. No. People will bring it up for 10 years. People will make out like nothing you do. They'll actually say what you said here with your characterization, that anytime anyone ever sees Sadokist, all they can ever think is racist. He hates the N-word. He fucking hates... No, that would be very unrealistic, wouldn't it?
And to be clear, I'm not saying they would
think that. That would be like
what I'm saying is, sure. Well, but what I'm saying is, let's say, a black person is just getting into CS:GO, and I'm not trying to imply that all black people, can't just like sort of shrug it off and enjoy the work or whatever. But I imagine there would be one or two out there who probably think actually it's a reflection of Matt's internalized thinking. Yeah. Right, and now, which you already started veering towards the next point I wanted to get into, and as I said, I do not think you can really explain away using that word as a pejorative at all. I do not think you can explain it away because
let me ask you this,
because it's loaded. Yeah, go on.
Anything you say, you can apologize and atone for. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially something that's actually not, like, as I've gone to lengths to point out here, it's very different to say in the stupid manner he did, as opposed to if he was talking to a black person and he wanted to really hurt their feelings and he said that word to them.
Right. And this is where I wanted to get into next. And that is that the one thing I will say is that for all people crying racism, it
actually wasn't an act of explicit racism.
No, but that's what I mean. So racism and racial insensitivity need to be recognized as two different and distinct things. So, for example, we've seen a lot with the Overwatch League. We've seen some stories blow up around that where, for example, and again, I don't know if we differed on this one because we never spoke about it, because obviously I don't come on your Overwatch podcast. But, with the XQC thing where he was banned and sort of portrayed to be using racially insensitive language for using an emote in Twitch chat, I said in his instance, I don't think you could prove that because he used it a lot, because why wouldn't you use an emote on a Twitch platform? Yeah. But If you're one of the people who every time Malik comes on screen and you spam it in chat, I think you've probably got a fucking problem with race in your mind.
I think you've hit a perfect point there, though, Richard, which is this. This is a point I always go to lengths to explain because it always does actually refer to me, which is this. Absolutely, there are many people who might consider me an asshole, offensive, insulting. Now, you know what's great? I admittedly, I have to put a caveat because it's the fucking world we live in. That might be illegal soon. But as of this exact moment, it's not illegal to be an asshole, to be insulting to people, to try to offend someone. None of those things are illegal. So I agree with you, Richard. I personally wouldn't go in an Overwatch chat and spam a black emote because a black person was on screen and go, look, I can do this and get away with it. Because here's the thing, you can get away with it, but you're an asshole. Now, if you can resolve all that, great. Have people think you're an asshole. The point is, though, people don't do that. They do the same thing we described before. Is it offensive? Yes. In that case, punish them to the ends of the earth, which, again, doesn't make sense. You're right. It's not an explicitly racist act in that case either. No. It's too difficult to prove, but it's definitely racially insensitive. Yeah. And you are being quite insulting to the person on screen if they found out about it.
Yeah. And this, so this is the discussion that really needs to happen, because I think unequivocally, and I will say this, that there is nothing in Matt's behavior, Matt's personality, anything I've come across, anything I've seen that would lead me to believe that Matt is a racist. And by racist, well, let me tell you, I do know racism exists, for sure. I've worked in several jobs, for example, like working for local branches of government that have, been about helping enfranchise communities of people that have come from disenfranchised backgrounds, immigrants, things like that, people fleeing tyrannical regimes, by giving them money so they can start their own businesses, bring their family out and create new lives for themselves. I think the life I've led is particularly clear. So let me tell you what I believe racism to be. Now, yes, on a very clear level, if you hate somebody because of the color of their skin, whatever that color may be, you are a racist. But also as well, I would say the insidious nature of racism is you then go about your day and use whatever means at your disposal to be prejudicial against those people on that basis. This could be at the highest level with you being a CEO and denying a black person a job. This could be you at a low level being a homeless person, and every time you see a black person, you shout a racial epithet at them to try and make them feel bad. There is a whole spectrum in between of what I believe racism to be. What I will say is, I don't think being racially insensitive warrants the same degree of outrage as what we should do to tackle legitimate societal systemic racism. What we're currently doing at the moment is we take people who say one word once or do one gesture once, and we say, well, they're a racist, aren't they? And then we push them out to the fringes of society with the KKK and the neo-Nazis and the extremists and the scum.
Well, the example I gave earlier, right, that everyone who posts a Pepe Frog is actually a real neo-Nazi in hiding.
And the problem with there's a problem with doing that, because racial insensitivity is still awful, still needs to be tackled. But how you tackle racial insensitivity is through communication. And communication becomes impossible if you push somebody out way, way, way into the periphery with the extremists and the scumbags. There's no coming back for them at that point. In fact, you will often hear a lot of these radical neo-Nazis who then have a change of heart later in their lives and want to come back to the light in society and realize everything they've been told is a lie and completely stupid. They always say the same thing, that actually it was that initial push away from certain groups because they said a few things that really helped radicalize them, because it helped create a victim complex in their mind, a target in their mind, that they were the martyrs. Now, what has to happen in an instance like this, and this is why I thought Yanko's tweet was especially well put, was that when somebody does something like this, and clearly Matt was oblivious to how fucking outrageous it is to say that in that context, in that way, at that time. Now, what you have to have happen is somebody has to explain why. Nobody wants to do that. No one wants to hold a hand out. It's not like we don't have black friends. It's not like we don't have black people that we work with. Sure, it's not on them to go out and tell them, but obviously there's a connotation there that is really destructive and unpleasant. And I think if you understand that, you wouldn't use the word and you wouldn't fight for the word and you wouldn't want to continually use it, and you would feel a little bit different about, yeah, but it's, free speech, or it's just a joke or whatever. You would feel a little bit different about it. And isn't it better that we communicate that instead of saying, well, that's it, you said it once, so fuck you. You get to the clan rally, you're a piece of shit. You're completely irredeemable now. And like I say, racism and racial insensitivity are not the same thing. And racists will be racially insensitive, but not everyone who is racially insensitive is a racist. That has to be accepted as fundamentally true. And if we don't accept that as fundamentally true, we're never going to bridge the gaps and find the common ground to actually start eroding and eliminating first racial insensitivity and then hopefully racism. And that is why sometimes you've got to not be a zealot. Yes, it's a good cause. Yes, we all want to stand up in solidarity for egalitarianism and equal rights. And yes, prejudice and racism and any discrimination of any kind is not fucking acceptable. But equally, it cannot be one strike and you are out forever, lose everything forever and ever and ever. Because how does anyone redeem themselves? You just literally then put them all on a fucking island and you're fighting them for the rest of time.
And you're also then going to be in a scenario where, let's be real, there are thousands of gamers use this term in the context he used it, which is not in an explicitly racist manner. It's in a racially insensitive manner. And we will never get through to these people if we tell them all, you're just secret racists. Because as I mentioned here, this was not an explicitly racist act. In fact, if I had to describe the best way, the way that I look at this in any way, is I would say this: I'm not against Sadokist. I'm against something he did. Now, if you can understand the key difference there, you'd understand my point I'm making here, which is people reacted exactly the same as if he had just said, I want all N-words to be killed. And he'd said it with a straight face and a suit and tie and a fucking placard, like Ronald Reagan giving a speech in the 1980s, totally so and sober. They couldn't have acted any more outraged, Rich, than if he'd done that. Now, he didn't do anything close to that, but the lack of nuance means you can't have a discussion about it. You're either pro or against. What a ludicrous position. I'm not against Sadokist because he did this. I'm against his actions, and I would hope that we could talk to him, that could get through to him. That by the way, I'd go ahead and assume just going through this experience will have given him a lot of time to reflect on things and what he's done and what he said, etc. And then you hope, surely the best case scenario is he actually comes back to the scene, starts commentating again. Yeah, he has to put up with a little bit of stick for a while of people bringing it up because people are arseholes like that. But in doing so, first of all, he never makes a slip up like this again. Secondly, maybe there's even good comes out of it and he actually tells other people who are friends of his or other people in this position, like, don't go down the road I did, I made a mistake. And which would ties into another aspect that I want to get to here, which is we're acting like, because we're using these uncharitable readings and we're doing this classic thing humans do, where we don't talk about the act, we talk about the person. So by saying a racist thing, he is a racist. Now, he's not a racist, 6 out of 10. He's just a racist. So there's him, there's Richard Spencer, and there's Adolf Hitler. They're all just racists. That's it. So they're all the same exact thing, same quantity, and we must treat them all the same. What a ludicrous proposition. Because actually, I must say, in this scenario, not only is racial insensitivity going to abound, but it's actually natural. That is naturally the way that people who grow up not surrounded by certain racial groups, and as I mentioned with the example earlier of people in early internet culture who essentially they think they're in the matrix, they don't know that there's a real world that's going to affect out there, and they're just surrounded by none of those people in the matrix, so they're thinking, I could say anything at this point. The whole point is that's just ignorance, isn't it? They're not even doing it out of some malice. They are people who haven't met they've never seen what a black person's face looks like when someone calls them that in a bar. They don't know the effect that this can have. Now, ignorance is not an excuse. It doesn't mean that you didn't do something wrong. But when someone is ignorant like that and you know it, like you've actually taken the time to listen to them, get to know who they are, then the difference is you would treat them very differently than someone who you knew maliciously and with full knowledge of that act explicitly meant to harm someone. You wouldn't treat those two things the same. You wouldn't in law. You wouldn't in any kind of setting except court of public opinion, unfortunately.
And this is why I said, like, the community, right? There's got to be a way to bridge the gap. the people that have been sort of sermonizing about this and saying, hey, have we got a problem within esports and gaming and streaming culture with racism? Because we've had a series of high profile instances that I suppose stems back to PewDiePie almost. And, there does seem to be one a week at the moment. And it's fucking just so cringeworthy and pathetic that it's the same shit happening. Like nobody learned a fucking thing. But, what they do is they don't, like, for example, they're talking about you and me and making assumptions about you and me. And they're talking about Matt and making assumptions about him. And they're talking about PewDiePie and making assumptions about him. At what point have they ever engaged and said, we'd like to talk about this with you specifically, this person who has done this transgression, and explain our point of view. And actually, just to show you, here's somebody that actually complained to us or felt hurt by it, and they can explain their point of view to you directly. And it's like, you're right. That doesn't ever happen, does it? You end up with these very two disparate sides that never talk to each other. And unfortunately, that's why it keeps happening. I'm not saying they're to blame, because obviously every person is responsible for their own actions, but you can never explain why racial sensitivity is a bad thing to somebody that engages in racial sensitivity if the people that know and can articulately explain why racial sensitivity is bad never talk to the people that don't understand why it's bad. It's just shared knowledge at this point. And despite the internet supposedly being able to bridge all these gaps and technology take us forward, it just hasn't happened like that. One side is saying everybody, as you said, if you've ever posted a Pepe, that means you would happily be in a white supremacist group. That's what they genuinely believe, that one day you will rise up and put people in camps. Well, we know that is preposterous, absolutely preposterous. But equally, you've got other people on the other side going, well, my words can never have consequences. They can never hurt people's feelings. There isn't any deeper, profound meaning to this. It's all just the lulz. Well, those two extreme idiotic groups are the flip side of the same coin. And if they would stop fucking banging their heads, against their respective echo chambers and actually have a respectful conversation with each other, I guarantee you this will stop happening. But people don't want to do that. It's too hard, isn't it? It's far better to demonize one side. This is what I mean. It's really hard for me because it's like I have used the term SJW. I have mocked the people I consider to be SJW, extreme leftists. But it's not like I don't think all of the time they don't, like they're idiots and everything they say is reprehensible. It's the thing that I struggle with my audience. Like whenever you try and find a sensible centrist position, there are members of my audience who go, well, he's joining the SJW. No, I'm not. I'm trying to find the middle ground, trying to find a sensible consensus.
What's bizarre to me is that people can quite easily see, basically people who aren't extreme leftists or even just leftists in general at the moment can clearly see this effect. It's famously called Trump derangement syndrome, which is that I'm not joking. The best example was recently where Trump implied that video games cause violence, and then a bunch of journalists who are leftists, who themselves have written articles saying games cause violence, flipped their opinion and were like, how dare he say this? They don't cause violence. And you go, holy shit, you don't even have the actual, you don't have any principles. Your principles are, whatever Trump is, I am the opposite. Well, here's the part that is so bizarre to me, Rich, is that people don't understand the same thing happens on the extreme right, which is that anything an SJW says, they go, that has to be totally wrong because he's mentally ill. It's like, well, no, obviously a lot of the things that person says might be in the category of seemingly unhinged and certainly will be uncharitable or will be extreme in nature. But there's got to be some seeds of truth to some of it, hasn't it? There's not all outrageous. It's like the concept of a lot of modern day feminists being absolutely outrageous and sexist in their behavior. Even if they absolutely do not at their heart actually believe some of the things they say, some of the things they say, the words, the flowery concepts of equality and liberty, those are obviously brilliant things that you can all agree with. Just because some cunts use it in a terrible way doesn't mean you have to pretend you're against all forms of equality. I mean, I've used this example so many times in esports because obviously one of the main issues that keeps coming up is it's always the sexism on in esports for logical reasons, because the majority of women are nowhere near as good as the men. It's not really a race issue because we have actually a decent amount of people who aren't white who've succeeded in esports. I mean, for a start off, fucking all the Koreans would be a pretty good example. So we clearly don't have full-on systemic racism. But you will often hear people say that there is systemic sexism in esports. And when they say that, I have never said impossible, couldn't exist. I always say the same thing. If you can give me some examples of it, I will go as a journalist and investigate, and I will see if this is accurate, and if you can give me other people who've suffered these problems. So actually this happened recently with the Overwatch League scenario, when these people who, similar people like you're talking about, by the way, like journalists who aren't in esports, they don't know Overwatch, they came in and said, you know, like basically like women are prohibited from being on these teams and they're not allowed to and they're discouraged. And I actually had a girl who tweeted me and she said something along the lines of like, because, you know, men always just say, well, that's not true. You know, any of them could be on a team. And they said the same arguments, you know, we'd all love them to be if they were good enough. But I had a girl who said, actually, you know, I'm like a semi-pro player and I tried for certain teams and, you know, and they turned me down and I found out later it was just because I'm a girl. And I said to this girl, okay, well, you know what? You don't have to come forward publicly. You can be an anonymous source, but tell me some of the information and I will run this story down. And I will do it from the perspective of I'm trying to see if I can find what you're talking about. I'm not trying to prove you wrong. I will see if there are other cases. If you've heard of any other girls who've had this as well, tell me about it. I'll get as many of these cases as I can. I'll run it down. And either we find out something extreme, like there is specific teams that have someone in place who maybe blocks someone even getting a trial, and therefore the male players think, well, no one's ever tried to trial with us, and they're actually mistaken. Or, even better, I'd say, maybe we find something out that's, again, a social aspect. Like, actually, you know what, male pros, it's not that they're explicitly against it, but they won't actually properly let a woman try with them. Or if they do, they'll be like, give euphemisms. Oh, she's a bit bossy or something. If that happened, I would absolutely report on it. But you can't have that. There's no one's discussion because it has to be one or the other. Where it's either total systemic sexism or racism, or there's none. And the people saying there's none, are you out of your mind? What, you think no one on a computer ever says something racial to someone they know is of that race to hurt them? Likewise, you think no one who's a man or a woman ever says something to the other gender to hurt them because they're from that gender and is essentially sexist? Of course they do. We all know it must happen because it happens to humans.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean. It's the binary thinking on both sides. I can't ever really get into it, you know. I probably have done my fair share, especially during the election, of mocking the sort of extreme fringes of the left, and I probably did it more than I did to the right. But you can see in all of these instances, like exactly like we're talking about now, even just to move away from politics, it is an absurd premise to say that there is no sexism, no racism. It's an equally absurd premise to imply that all of the issues facing women in esports, whatever you deem them to be, are based on some sort of patriarchal force, when in actual fact there's a ton of people, and people would never believe it if I said it, but I know you're one of them, that have always tried to help and have always had the back of anybody that is like being sort of bullied or picked upon, right? You know, like, because that's not how we fucking roll. So it is fucking so strange to me that we end up having the same problems cyclically because we will not talk about those problems and both sides can't come around the fucking table and get it together.
Another reason why we can't do it is because it is these extreme people who in this case appear to have the moral high ground, because that's what they take and claim for themselves. Hence, as I said, bragging that they haven't used the N-word on a live stream. Like, well, fucking hell. Get in line with the other 4 billion people getting a medal right now, mate. Like, all of us haven't. What are you talking about? But these same people, I actually think they explicitly don't want discussion, because discussion would lead to nuance, to understanding, to empathetic behavior. Whereas in reality, what they want is they want to ensure people like us who are saying, let's talk about this, are eliminated. So the floor is clear for them to be the ones who tell us how we're going to move forward into this brave new world of no racism and sexism. Because as I alluded to before, let's be real, we are never going to eliminate racism and sexism. I mean, on the most core level, they're forms of tribalism, which as far as we can tell biologically are how humans and basically primates behave. It's just the way they are. It's the way they form groups. It's the whole in-group, out-group mentality, which obviously the ultimate irony is the very people we're talking about are expressing an extreme version of in-group, out-group mentality while not realizing they're criticizing a form of in-group, out-group mentality with racism. It's so ludicrous, isn't it? Like, we could have these. What's sad is, I say this every time, I even said it after this, we could have so many brilliant discussions because of this bad thing that would help everyone start to understand things more. But we can't, because what will happen is people will just tar us with the idea that we're defending racism. Now, I made this point on Twitter, but I will again reiterate it. I have been, as far as I can tell, one of the only 100% consistent people on this exact topic of when someone says something considered to be insensitive or a slur on Twitter. So even when they were people who are rank enemies of mine, like KNG, or whether they were people who definitely had shown animosity to me, like Cold Zera, or someone who I don't particularly like, because I think he's an idiot, like XQC, I have in all scenarios, notice none of these are my friends, I have in all scenarios argued for the same thing. Let's look at the context. In certain scenarios, there is cultural context where it might not mean what you mean. Let's be reasonable and try and give them an appropriate punishment, which also explains to the public why this isn't allowed, but doesn't make the person a pariah for it. I have been absolutely consistent. But you know what? Every time this happens, Richard, people just tell me the 100% opposite of what I just said. That actually, I said KNG should be fired and I had him fired. And that in the past, I've always in fact, people were telling me if this was a Brazilian player who said this, you'd be tearing him apart. I've just told you KNG and Cold Zera did stuff, by the way, worse than this. Because the difference is they were explicitly doing it. I mean, the case of like Cold Zera, he literally said that word to hurt the person. KNG said it. Admittedly, his was an edgy joke, but he still was trying to imply it's a bad thing. You know, in this particular scenario, this is why you can't have these discussions, because it would have to be people like me and you who are in the community who set them up. But we're not going to be allowed to have the discussion if we're painted as racists, etc., and extreme ideologues, which I wouldn't say we are on particularly any topic, I don't think. If anything, I've spent half this argument given all these caveats to things I believe. So,
because obviously we spent like almost an hour now on Sadokist. Let's talk about the other component of this. And Sam, while we're talking about this, if you want to bring up Matt's apology and put it on screen, because we'll talk about his apology at the end. The other component that people then wanted to sort of load into the conversation was that he was asked, so again, context matters. So at the instance that it was clear that Matt was inebriated and was doing this live AMA on his birthday, DonHaci, a community member who has been involved in the past with some hacking related activity of Skype logs.
Basically, the main thing he's famous for.
Sure.
It's not just a random community member, right?
Yeah, and that's how I met him back when he was using the username Yi Lamau. I did a video about him, actually, at one point, because he was putting these leaks out that were obtained through passwords. One thing I'll also say is he's always been good to me. He met me by basically saying, these are your passwords, you should change them. And he even taught me through how to get more secure, where he obtained the passwords from. And when you consider if you wanted to get leaks, obviously my shit would have been the fucking gold mine. And there may have been a vulnerability he could have exploited, and he chose not to do it. I'm always super grateful to him for that and talking me through it. And we've remained in contact since. So I've never had an issue with him. There's a perception that, and I think it's shared by some CS talent, that he was responsible for Henry G Skype being compromised. And it was
by the way, I actually said that, so I will point out, someone did point out to me that apparently he didn't do it, he just shared it or something. Like it wasn't him. He signal boosted it, basically. Because by the way, this is a point I want to make very quickly. The reason why that's different from me just retweeting any old person is because in this scenario, one thing I actually like about the modern day of esports is, aside from HLTV.org, where they are willfully bad at moderating, you can't actually get exposed stuff out there in esports. Like, there are loads of famous female players that have had nudes, which I've never seen, because how would I find access to them? Unless I knew the person who has those links, I'll never see them. You can't put them on Reddit. It'll be removed immediately. Normal websites will instantly nuke a post like that and even ban the user so he can't continue to do it. Basically, it's very hard for that stuff to get out now. So in this particular scenario, that guy definitely, if you go look at his behavior, went out of his way to signal boost that material. He wanted the world to see that. So that's not the same as hacking. Absolutely, I'll go on back on and say that. But he definitely was malicious in his behavior.
Sure, he did maliciously spread it. And look, I'm stood here saying I still have no issue with him, even though within those screenshots there was me and Henry talking about how difficult esports can be, and I was made a joke comparing it to the wrestler, saying, "Yeah, we're all on pills and powders all the time." time to keep us up, and it can actually be quite a miserable existence. I mean, obviously, I'm only half joking, but but again, I don't mind that. If a Skype, I'm a journalist. Some Skype leaks have been my bread and butter. It would be incredibly hypocritical of me to be upset with somebody spreading a Skype leak when I've used Skype leaks to get some big stories, not least of all the Phantom Lord story, right? So I just fuck it. I'm all right with it.
No, it's Sadokist's position, though. That's the point.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the key thing. Within those leaks, it became clear that Matt has a very unfortunate STD, right? And it's a sensitive information. It is protected. In fact, there is an uproar right now about the, I believe it's the Grindr app, which is a dating app for gay men, actually sort of having a data breach regarding HIV status. So to give you an idea about how sensitive this topic is, nobody would want their medical records out in the public domain. Nobody would want people to know they had an STD. And this piece of information was put out into the public domain by an account that is now defunct.
Oh, what a surprise. That's weird. Just someone didn't want credit for it, I guess. That's weird. Nobody can make multiple accounts, so I mean, that's listen, never mind.
Listen, I'll tell you. If it was him, he would have took credit. If it was Don, he would have took credit for it. I'll tell you why I know that, because you're right. He does dislike Matt. He would have took great pleasure in it. It's not like he stopped leaking shit out there. He was doing it during the roster moves. I'm pretty sure if he'd done it, he would have absolutely took credit for it, and he wouldn't. And that would have been that. But anyway, regardless, because we can only talk about what we know. He did signal boost it. So as a result of that, in Matt's mind, Matt has always held him responsible for leaking information about his medical status, private, personal information into the public domain. So when Don came to the stream to basically taunt Sadokist while he was drunk, and somebody from, I believe, Don's, because Don has his own Discord, somebody from Don's Discord was saying, well, what do you think of DonHaci? Needless to say, as a result of all of this context, Matt was not very charitable. Yes, he did say that he feels DonHaci should commit suicide. He did say he should put a belt round his neck and jump off a cliff. He did say he would celebrate his death. None of these things are particularly nice. None of these things are particularly
Obviously
nice
not.
things to
They
hear.
are directly meant to be offensive and insulting.
Yes, but again, without the context, without people knowing all of that, it does take on a new degree. It's not like he randomly lashed out at somebody because
Which is how it was reported.
Yes. And again, somebody in his position should absolutely not be saying that, even to somebody that he perceives to be responsible for something that is an egregious breach of personal data and privacy. But ultimately, the way it's been framed is that he drunkenly lashed out at someone and told them to kill themselves, and he would celebrate them doing it, which is disingenuous. But again, as we've said, in your professional position, with the personal responsibility attached to that, it is unacceptable.
Obviously, yeah.
So I don't know if you have anything to add to that part.
Well, and again, we're all going to play this game where not only do we all play the game where none of us ever say anything privately, we all just I'm so beyond it now, Rich. Luckily, I'm in a position in my career where it doesn't really matter as much. I can sort of get away with it, but I'm really done with this idea that the public face we all put on, we are really going to go to our graves pretending was our private face as well. And that we don't think or say things privately that we would never say publicly. And therefore, we can even act outraged at things that are done publicly that privately we wouldn't give a fuck about if it was our mate who did it. Like, this is such a level of because here's the problem in that scenario, right? It's like telling lies all the time. You can trick people. You'll trick some people into thinking you're telling the truth. But to yourself, you'll always know you were a liar. And really, that's actually the worst part of it. So in this scenario, deep down, you know it's not that outrageous. You know it's not as bad as people are claiming. Like, for example, anyone who's claiming that in doing so, he mocked the concept of suicide, or he literally wants that person to actually commit suicide, and there's no such thing as hyperbole, he literally would celebrate that person's death. Remember, Rich, hyperbole doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't exist. Everything is interpreted literally. Language, which within it has probably the most amazing mechanism ever created, in my opinion, of any human invention, which is the concept of the metaphor. The ability to build within what you're saying things that conjure certain imagery or archetypal forces. No, that all doesn't exist anymore. We're going to interpret everything everyone says as 100% rational materialist, literal interpretation. Like anything you say is that, and there's no such thing as, like, I mean, sadly, this ties into the Donald Trump thing again. Anyone who thinks everything he ever said was totally like 100% what he meant, and if he ever said something about like starting a war, that meant he literally wanted to start. Well, no, obviously not. That would be a ludicrous. Why would you ever take anyone at face value like that? You wouldn't if it was your friend or someone you knew. You'd think, what's the context of what they're saying here? What's their emotional state when they're saying it? I mean, I always use this example, Rich, because I feel like it's one surely people can relate to. That if I wrote down a transcript and said, look at this statement here, the person said, I could fucking kill you.
Yeah.
Like, if you read that on paper, you'd go, fucking hell, who said that? Well, it was actually my mum when I was about 7, and I wasn't getting ready for school like I was supposed to. And then she was like, are you ready? And I was like, oh, just give me 10 more minutes. She's like, I could fucking kill you. Now it has no menace whatsoever to it. There's no threat there. There's nothing you'd report. There's nothing you'd expect to be fulfilled. There's clearly like frustration, hyperbole. When you put in all the context, it actually explains everything about it that the phrase couldn't explain in itself. But that's exactly what people will never do with any of these scenarios. And by the way, in this scenario, that's not what Sadokist was doing. What Sadokist was doing was someone who's been an arsehole to Sadokist, for no reason, by the way. Sadokist never done anything to this person. Just been an arsehole to him, and is now trying to publicly taunt him, with the implication being like, haha, I know something that should really be kept secret, but look, I'm exposing it all. And then on top of that, Matt's obviously responded explicitly, unlike the racial thing. This is actually where he wanted to say that, to hurt the person. Clearly that's his intent. But guess what? It's not illegal to want to hurt people's feelings.
Yeah.
It's obviously not what you should do. Yeah. Clearly. And if you are a representative of massive tournaments, you're not going to get away with that. That goes without saying and should be a given for everyone, I assume.
So just to end the Sadokist part of the podcast by, sort of referencing the apology. Again, Sam, I don't know if you brought it up while we were talking, but if we can bring it up again, that would be great. So he entitled it, My Apology, No Excuses. And it's quite long, so I won't read it all because we've already sort of gone over the topic. The key takeaways, I think, are that he has said that he is, incredibly disappointed. It's pretty much summed up in the first 2 paragraphs where he says, the other night I spoke out of turn and out of character. I was someone that I do not approve of and someone that I do not recognize. I do not identify with anyone who would use derogatory and hateful language to belittle any individual, and I do not identify with someone who would wish harm on another individual, no matter what wrongs I feel they have done to me in the past. I have betrayed myself, and I am disgusted, disappointed, and in disbelief at my own actions. I was angered by what I saw when I watched the clips of myself, at the incredulous and adolescent immaturity of the person and their indefensible and frankly pathetic language. More so because it was and is a person that I hold to extremely high standards, me. There is no excuse for what I said. Racism of any variety is absolutely despicable and unacceptable. No person is void of judgment for their own actions, and that applies to me as well. While I appreciate people trying to play down the situation, there are no grounds to do so.
Definitely are, but okay.
Well, I think all in all, I think it's it's really weird that people rate apologies these days. Oh, that was a good apology. That was a bad apology. But what's up?
Well, that's how you know when someone just wanted blood, Rich. Because what happens is people who want blood hate apologies. You know why? Because the apology signals it's time to end. It's like someone who stood around when you're at school and a fight breaks out, right? And they punch each other a bit and then the fight just stops. Sometimes randomly it'll just, both people sort of realize, what the fuck am I doing here? And it'll stop. They're like trying to push the kid back in and get, oh, go on, get him more. That's the sort of person who's like, this apology's not good enough. This is a non-apology. All those sorts of statements. Like, what's funny is when I read this apology, I was fucking laughing because what's hilarious is I don't think he intended this, but this is how, if you write and you try to write in an earnest manner, you will always end up, whether advertently or inadvertently, writing about yourself and what you actually think. So in this apology, you do see one of Sadokist's real flaws as a person, which is he is something of a narcissist. And so the apology is sort of like, and you know what disappointed me even more about this is it's one of the most fucking brilliant people I know. Me. It's just like, I was reading it like, and you know what? I hold me to the highest standard because no one could do what I could do. All right. Inadvertent, obviously, but it is hilarious.
Yeah, all right. So a little bit of laughs.
Version for April Fool's next year where I do some apology like that, you know.
All right, a little bit of laughs to ease the tension. Let's talk about some fucking Counter-Strike. And just to put a pin in that one for good. We obviously, Matt isn't going to be at Pro League. He took the decision to sort of stand down, step out the spotlight for a little bit, which I think is appropriate. We don't know when we'll see him again, or indeed, you know, how people are going to feel about this. I saw a lot of like theory crafting about like, oh, he's going to be banned, he'll never be allowed on Twitch ever again, and all this nonsense. I think that's like really just unhelpful, hyperbolic, speculative nonsense. And ultimately, it comes down to the tournament organizers, and if they can see past this in light of the apology, which is genuinely, you know, sincere. I know from talking to him, like he's definitely ashamed of what he did. You know, I think there's a way back to him, and sure, you know, I'm not talking about like complete blanket fucking forgiveness. That's for, you know, forget all about it or whatever.
Example, Richard. And when I say this example, I actually don't like the fact that I have to bring this example up because, as you will be able to tell by my tone in this interview, well, not interview, but talk show, I don't like the fact that people essentially are treated like they're on death row and forever people can bring up things that they did in the past as though they have to apologize to someone 5 years later personally who wasn't there and who wasn't in any way affected. No, there is something of a time span where you have apologized, you have been remorseful, you have done your time, and now the community must move on. So an example I will now give you is purely to highlight that it is not for idiots to go and message this person and harass him about this again. But one of the most loved commentators in esports history is a man from South Africa. Is he from South Africa? Yeah, Toby One. Is that where he's from? South Africa? Mm-hmm. Yes, I don't know why I think he's from Australia there. Right, he's from South Africa. And famously, he did...
Oh, no, actually, no, he is Australian. I don't know why I'm nodding. Yeah, I know he's Australian.
Whatever. I don't know why I was confused on that one. But anyway, I guess it would have been more outrageous if he was South African, actually. But he basically did once, in a semi-public setting, say this exact word. He wrote it. And he wrote it in a very racially insensitive manner, but again, not actually explicitly racist, as in he didn't literally say it to a black person to humiliate. No, he didn't do any of that, but it was very racially insensitive if you look up the story of him using this word. Now, as a result, he had some flack himself. This was very early in Dota 2. This is Toby One I'm referring to here. And after a while, he overcame it. He is still one of the biggest commentators in Dota and in esports in general. And I'm actually glad that this is an example that exists that we can give, that you can come back from it. And it's all about what your attitude is to it, basically. This is why, actually, when people brought up the KNG example, which you will note I did not bring up at any point on Twitter, other people brought that up, mostly Brazilian fucking idiots trying to justify what KNG did. But when they brought it up, I explicitly made this point that they still don't get to this day, that even KNG's stupid tweet isn't what got him fired. What got him fired was an attitude that was an impenetrable brick wall that said, you will never get through to me and explain to me why this is unacceptable. And every Western or esports org went, fuck working with someone like that. Never, never. And they all said, right, you are blackballed. That's what really cost KNG his career. Sure. Now, in this scenario, Toby One didn't do that. And Toby One did pay his penance, did come back, did recover to the extent that now no one even brings that up anymore. Admittedly, it's many years. I think it was like 2011 or something that happened. Now, I would hope the same thing could happen to Sadokist. I don't see why any big tournament organizer would blackball him forever, not least because if you do so, you're just playing into the hands of the extreme ideologues we talked about before. Just because they're going to tell you something that's factually inaccurate, like you're a racist if you ever employ this guy again. Whereas you're not. You're actually someone who's saying, I will allow people to be rehabilitated as long as they have been rehabilitated, which is actually a brilliant message to send to a community, which, as I pointed out, will always have some perhaps very small undercurrent of insensitivity towards races and sexes that are not themselves or the majority in group. So in this setting, I don't know how long it is. That's very difficult to gauge because, again, it's all on which tournament organizer is willing to gamble bringing him back first. But I would personally think something like 2 or 3 months. I think 2 or 3 months at this point would be good anyway to just reevaluate your life. Like, if you actually knew anything about Sadokist's situation, he is the most overworked person I have ever met in esports. Nobody's situation compares to his. Days away from home, number of events worked, hours worked, outrageous travel schedules. Now, again, none of that means you then get a free get out of jail free card to say whatever you want.
Not.
But you have to look at that context. So I would say, even just for the state of his own life, this is actually an ideal time to take a few months, reflect on this, reflect on your career, then hopefully come back. Luckily, in CS, I'll even go ahead and say, I think CS and Dota will be the most forgiving because it's not one big tournament organizer who has to give the seal of approval. Let's say ESL, for some bizarre reason, said, we don't really want to bring you back, actually, like they did with me for a few years where I was on the outs. The difference is, as was in my case, eventually, I think as long as he's done the right things, there will be someone, whoever it might be, who will say, the benefit of having Sadokist, one of the best casters, cast my event, is worth me being the first person to bring him back and see what the, gamble on what the public reaction. So I think it'll all kind of work itself out. It just takes a bit of time. Once there's distance, here's the sad thing. Once there's distance, you can tell why people are outraged about these things, because that goes away. Like, when people bring up some of the things I've done in the past, they usually do it as a joke now. There's very few people who are actually outraged, not least because a lot of those were overblown in specific cases. And again, people willfully misreported a lot of the facts. So once you get some distance, it won't be as extreme as it seems now, I think.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the roster action we got going on this week. Lots of crazy stuff happening. One of the sort of lesser stories that kind of got lost in the noise, because there's been a lot of high-profile roster swaps, is you remember there was a group of Brazilian players that all wanted to play with each other against any, by any means necessary, at any cost, that they were a brotherhood, and that brotherhood must not be tampered with or broken up. And of course, I'm talking about the ex-Immortals players here.
Over. Everyone's going to have a eventually, Rich.
Yeah, Henny, Lucas, FNX, KNG. They were called Team Villamix, kind of by the community. They eventually went on to become Nautem Como, and obviously they did lose KNG off the back of some crazy shit that happened. Well, it turns out, like Duncan says, the fucking party's over, the lights have come on, the police have turned up outside, keep down the fucking noise, it is time to go, because this supposedly impenetrable brotherhood, which, by the way, literally caused a fucking wave of destruction through Counter-Strike that went all the way through the major.
How many spots at the major were fucked? How many teams are out hundreds of thousands of dollars? Lost expected value from people's... It's outrageous. I've never seen anyone collectively cause this much damage, probably ever in esports history when you consider how big it is now.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, just the expanse of it. So it makes it especially weird that despite all of that, they couldn't stick together, which is what they said they wanted to do. That was the torch paper that got lit, that started this whole fucking chain reaction. So Henny and Lucas have left Nautem Como, and it was interesting because at the time they left, which we now know can't be true, they were strongly linked with joining SK Gaming, the iteration of SK Gaming we suspect is going to go to Immortals. We've got to keep that in mind. But maybe they're joining SK and forming a new team at SK Gaming. We don't really know because the situation with SK isn't exactly clear. But I just wanted your thoughts on this, because as Henny and Lucas went out the door, the other component of this story is KNG has gone back to Nautem Como from Virtue. So I don't know if there was any issues between the team. Maybe Henny and Lucas had a realization, actually, this guy is a toxic asset. We shouldn't be fucking hitching our wagon to fucking KNG's wild ride. But what do you think's gone on here? Because it just seems like so anticlimactic that we never even got to see the four players play together, because Bit coming back, you're like, okay, you got a great old school in-game leader. You got Henny and Lucas, very good players. You got FNX, we all know he's good. We never even got to see that, let alone the team that they could have been with KNG if he wasn't a fucking absolute lunatic. So what did you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, the big story for me is the fact that, as you said, that apparently the Twins have decided they don't want to play with KNG, because that's what the move signals. Also, to me, this is pure speculation, obviously, but the fact that this team is willing to sign KNG actually suggests to me that I don't think they are going to be joining SK Gaming to replace the current team if the current team goes to Immortals/MIBR. Because in this setting, as you use the term there, toxic asset. By the way, when Richard says toxic asset, he's not using toxic in the term like League of Legends term.
Light, yeah.
He means literally a toxic asset in the term that's used, which as in, if you take this on board, it's going to have a negative effect on everything. Well, the negative effect of having KNG is after all the other orgs saw what happened to 100 Thieves, now they got completely fucked over, and Immortals, no one wants anything to do with this guy. So actually, to me, it looks as though this NTC team is going to somehow remain outside of basically the main esports world. Like they'll remain in Brazil, or they'll remain an org NTC and they'll get sponsors. And who knows, maybe from that they can get into some tournaments, through online qualifiers. I don't know. But I suspect this means that those players won't be in SK. Now, I agree with you. The logical follow-on is maybe the Twins will be the ones who make their team in SK as the replacements, and they will form a new squad. I don't know who they'll pick up. Obviously, that's the tough part to know, because the fact that they've left together, like, there's plenty of teams could pick up that duo. I could see an NA team picking up that duo and putting it in. Why not, right? They're good players. They've got experience.
Yeah. I mean, look, so it is strange, like you say, that this Nowtem Como team seems like it's just going to be one of these also-ran teams. But given that Henny and Lucas were linked with the Fallen lineup of SK because there was these supposed 2 slots available, and now the Nowtem Como team was sort of meant to be linked to be going to SK Gaming to stay after the Fallen's team went to join Immortals/Made in Brazil. Well, now that definitely isn't happening. So it's either SK Gaming are going to build around Henny and Lucas, which you would have presumed these would be the players to do it with. And certainly no top tier organization's going to touch KNG for a while, for all the reasons we've just sort of talked about in the first hour of the discussion. But this means that SK Gaming don't have a fully fledged plan for what happens when their team leaves, and now Tem Como, despite having FNX, who I always thought was a fucking straight fire player when he was within SK Gaming,
and they've got Phelps, remember?
Yeah, and Phelps.
They have some mad talent.
Yeah, where the fuck are they gonna be? So again, it's this weird problem. I think what we've found in Brazilian CS in general is it's kind of very similar to like what's happened in France. Okay, that you had all these brilliant players, you had this golden generation of talent present itself in CSGO. One lineup rose to become the best team in the world, and then quickly behind them, you had another lineup rise to become, a top 10, then a top 5 team. But unfortunately, because of a history that goes probably all the way back to 1.6 in some instances, there are a lot of personalities that can't get along. And as as these iterations of people have tried to play with each other and created new feuds and new perceived truths about who can and can't work with each other, you are now in a position very much like the French scene, which is, we all know there's a sick 5 out there that you could put together for France. Shame none of those motherfuckers like each other, isn't it, really? So you never get the dream lineup. Yeah,
and then even worse, the secondary aspect you have to add. This is kind of like the what happened in the NA scene, wasn't it? For ages, they were like, oh, there's not enough money in our scene. Then they were like, it was too much money. We can't sign any of the players we want. Same scenario also. It's a nightmare trying to do buyouts. So in the end, you can't even pick the other 5 outside of SK currently, because half of them probably are in fucking Team 1 and half of them are in another team. And then you can't get the contracts together, which also, by the way, is what's going on in the French scene. Like, you notice none of the proposed G2 lineups involved any Envious players, because who the fuck wants to go back to Envious, who you just reamed out on the last French shuffle, and go, can I have your best players? And they'll go, yeah, sure. Get out your fucking wallet. We're going to the nth degree on this one as well. Like, when you add that in both scenes, I think that's what's tearing both scenes. It's like from opposite directions. Because obviously, if you can overcome the player beef, you could have the team, but can you simultaneously overcome the contract? There's 2 battles to fight on, mate. And I wouldn't envy anyone who's in that position.
Yeah, and I think overall it really dilutes sort of Brazilian CS, because you end up with 2 sort of...
it's depressing as fuck, isn't it? Like, the fact FNX hasn't played like a fucking LAN game since, I think, like something ridiculous like Star Series or something last year, something outrageous. This is garbage. Like, not only that, the whole time he's been getting a salary or been in big orgs, but we can never see him play. He's in some mad contract prison. That sucks.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I don't know. I wish there was like sort of a way to kind of like, there comes a time where you have to realize, we saw it in G2. It didn't work out in G2, but there comes a time where you realize like your playing days are finite. All this stuff about, I don't want to work with him. I think he's an asshole. I don't know if I could spend time with him in hotels or traveling. If that comes at the expense of 1 year on the fucking bench, it's not worth it, dude, because you literally have like a few years. In CS, we're very lucky. Our organizations that own the players, contractually, don't burn you out because they haven't got a franchise slot they're desperate to keep. There's an open tournament circuit. You are entitled to a holiday, and you don't have to grind fucking solo queue 50 hours a fucking day to make some contractual obligation. So our players generally tend to play a little bit longer than, the reamed out fucking messes of League of Legends who were fucked at 24 with carpal tunnel.
We also have, I think, too forgiving a scene when it comes to orgs trying to facilitate fucking player moves. They'll literally let you go, even if you're like an asset, which is a good player, but you don't work in my team. In a CSGO org, I'll let you go to my rival to make a team to maybe beat me because I'm a nice bloke. That's what people actually like and see it. It's mental. Whereas if I tell you, if you want to see a scene that's exactly everything you don't want from esports, go and look at fucking Chinese League of Legends. Because in Chinese League of Legends, the orgs, through their fucking like union that they have, control the whole scene. And so not only can they lock you out forever, that you can also be in a scenario where, say, for example, what I just explained there happens. You're a pretty good player. You used to be one of my star players, but you don't fit in my current lineup and I've got a player to replace you. You don't get to have a career anymore. I either put you on some B league where no one watches you, or I put you in contract prison forever. You signed a 3-year contract. Unlucky, mate. You were one of the best players in the league. You'll never play again in the LPL, of course. So that doesn't happen in CS. We're actually having an amazing scene for that not happening generally.
It started to happen in CS in China. You saw what happened with the Tai Lu situation.
Sure, well, that's exactly, same scenario starting to build up, isn't it, unfortunately?
Yeah, where the fucking players had to come out and apologise for simply just asking, is it possible to leave and go to another team, sir? No, actually what we're going to do is we're going to hold that contract over you for the rest of your fucking life. You will go nowhere. So it is insane. But like I say, I think the Brazilians, you got, the sort of secondary Brazilians, the ones that aren't going to be in Fallen's lineup, you all got to get it together, man. Like it's fucking wild.
There's way too much beef as well, isn't there?
Squash that shit, because you're going to regret it when you're fucking 30 years old and you're having to play on fucking, for fun, essentially, playing on like semi-pro teams. You could have, think about it, that lineup could have been at a fucking major. They should have been at the major. They would have done damage at that major. They were my fucking dark horse pick. I had them down. A lot of people did. A lot of people were even saying that's not a dark horse, Richard. They can finish top 4 at a major. They never went. They never competed. Now, when's the next time Eni and Lucas are going to be at a major? They were major finalists. They didn't go back to the major to potentially win it and go one step further. And now you're in some weird fucking limbo. It is a waste of your talent. It makes no sense to me why you do it.
Sadly, though, I have to say, knowing players, these players will never realise what they missed until like 3 years from now, when maybe either their career or CSGO's done. And then they're just like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not ever going to have a chance to be paid 5 fucking figures US dollars as a Brazilian native with probably not very much higher education to play a video game for fun and for my own professional, like whatever, for my profession. I could have done that for a few more years, and instead I sort of dicked around. Why? Didn't want to play with him. He's once called me a dickhead in a pod. Like, it's just so pathetic, isn't it? Like, get over it, mate. Because the problem is we have this happen all the time. I like the way you reference the French scene, because it's not just this fucking scene. We've had it happen in the Danish scene with KGB going in and out of the fucking TSM lineup forever. Yeah. Every single scene has a player who should play with another player, and they would be fucking amazing and rock the world, and they don't until usually it's too late. Until like at the end, we're both desperate, so fuck it, let's make. It's like making this team now with existing Shocks and Kenny S. I want to see that in 2014, you daft cunt, not in 2018 when half a year reamed out, and as I said, Shocks is leaning down like fucking Jesus, resurrecting you cunts back to life. I don't want to see it now, do I? It's like that joke of like, fucking that. What's that Ricky Gervais joke where he goes, "Do you want to see Cher in concert?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "It's not 1975, is it?"
Exactly. So look, while we're talking about Brazilian players, there was an interesting sort of kind of tidbit of information that came up. So it looks like Taco, initially when we did our last episode, it looked like maybe it was Cloud9, so he was going to be joining the North American team. There were screenshots floating that he had tryouts over there. Looks actually like it's going to be Liquid that he joins. He put out a tweet, which again, Sam, if you want to dig it, if you find it, and it was just all asterisks, and it was like you did the last two words, it was the same number as Team Liquid, so people sort of hype up. Yeah, no. So I don't, he tried though. He tried.
I know. Yeah.
He tried, love him.
It's not much of a fucking Dan Brown novel, is it? Come on, mate.
Yeah. But he did like an Instagram post as well, where he said that I had offers from teams from American, Brazilian, and European teams. I'll also give you that, Sam. There you go. I've decided to play for an American team. A move to Europe, despite being a cool opportunity, would probably be detrimental to me because of several factors. I'm happy in the US and used to here. Besides, I will remain in California, very close to other teams and to my Brazilian friends. I really wanted a new experience, and I have no doubt that this will be a phenomenal experience that I will take with me for the rest of my life. At the end of the day, I was able to pick the team that I wanted and that I think is the best for my future. That is what matters the most, and I am very happy with my decision. In the coming days, you will know more details. Thank you for all the support. So he said that, actually some European teams reached out to him, which I think is very interesting. I couldn't really hypothesize or speculate as to who they might have been, but also that he said, I got to pick, joining Team Liquid, that it was on me. I had a ton of offers and I'm going to go there. So what do you think about that? And what do you think Team Liquid are going to look like with Taco on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is like the part that you said about the fact that he essentially ruled out a move to Europe. Because what tilts me about this is, like, think about it logically. Within FaZe, Olaf plays a supportive role. Now, at times on certain maps, that might mean playing an entry. So I don't mean literally a support in terms of what people think that is. But he definitely is not one of the star players. You've just seen he has to take a few months off and that they're bringing Existing. That to me was the most obvious one if any region was open to do. Because if you tackle, you go straight to a team that can win right now, everything. Yep. 2, you get to fuck up SK Gaming if you play them. And 3, it'd only be a test for everyone anyway. Like you'd see if it fit you, and if it's better, maybe they'd just say, you know what, Olaf, you're not coming back, mate. And I even think that might have worked for them because, as I told you on the last episode, you put someone with a supportive mindset in that team. For me, that's what takes them to the next level and lets them win. But obviously, that's not happening. So then it just becomes, do you go to Team Liquid or go to Cloud9? Now, in this set of circumstances, I definitely understand going to Team Liquid because they already can win right now. They've got the pieces there. And presumably, he's going to replace Steel. That's the assumption we all have. Well, he probably is even an upgrade in terms of the raw role that Steel's going to do. I think Steel's a better fragger. And then you look at the fact that Cloud9, well, there is no Cloud9 to join, mate. They basically got 3 players. So you can go join those 3 players. And then at the time, I think they themselves didn't even know, are we getting FNS? Are we not? Are we getting JDM? Are we not? Are we getting someone else? Are we not? So if I'm Taco, I don't want to join a team like that. I've just come off being on one of the best teams in the world. I've got to go to a team that has a chance to win. Because basically, whether I win with this team or not, it's about proving myself again. It's about showing that I am a really good player. That's what's going to ensure me a long career. And then, you add in that you just get to stay in California. I mean, it all lines up to me. It's pretty obvious. Yeah,
not only that, though, as well, I think coming in for Steel, assuming that's how it goes down, real talk, Taco has had to change his role a number of times to remain on that SK Gaming lineup. He's had to be very versatile and flexible. I think, honestly, in terms of coming in for Steel, who was kind of like, almost like a make weight in the team, I think it's an overall upgrade in terms of that versatility. And I think because of that, I think Taco will actually have a bit more say in how he plays and what role he takes on and what he does. I'm pretty sure, actually, that was like maybe a caveat of him joining. So I definitely think we're going to see a better Taco at Team Liquid. I think things were a little bit stale at SK Gaming. There's a different kind of weight of expectation when you play for a team that's like number 2, or are they number 1 because they keep beating the number 1 team, but they're not winning the tournaments they should be winning. So how good are they really? Now you're on Team Liquid, and they have just been crowned, by virtue of sort of Cloud9 crumbling apart post-major. They've been crowned number one in NA, and we know right now the standard in NA is so high that actually that immediately places you round up there or thereabouts with your old employers at SK Gaming. So
imagine being a Cloud9 fan.
Oh, dude.
Because you just literally you hit the highest high. Everything happened. Your own delusions about the fact they're the best team happened because you've won the major. Everything's possible. It's the era of NA. Next thing you know, Team Liquid's right back up there. What the fuck? But we've just won the major. That's unfair. They're ahead of you now. They're outplacing you at every tournament. Then on top of that, good news, guys. Wow, what's happening? I'm letting our best player go to that team that we're finally beating. Why are you doing that, though? He just asked me. He's a nice guy.
Yeah. He's hated you all along.
Major's all I wanted anyway. I've had my major. Let him go.
Yeah. So,
what about that? Are we at least getting the tackle guy now? So we've got a good spot. Nah. Do you know FNS? What FNX? Fucking up. Nah. FNS. What? Right. That guy from Complexity? Yeah, he's joined it. Anyone else?
Hold on. You're giving the rest of the show away, Duncan. Fucking simmer down and be out of fucking material, won't I, you fucking daft cunt? Right. Anyway, SK Gaming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, SK Gaming confirmed Stewie 2K joining. One of the craziest roster moves of 2018, without a shadow of a doubt. Been coming a while, as you rightly said. Went to Jack Etienne and said, "Hey, I want to join SK Gaming." Obviously, Stewie is a younger player and a player that it does have, I would say, he has a lot of respect in the same way that Simple sort of looks up to Markelov. Stewie looks up to a lot of sort of the older, more veteran pros, the better players. And honestly, if you're a younger player embarking on a career, the idea that you get to play with Fallen, I imagine, is super. It would be on most people's bucket list to play in a team with that guy, whatever your level. So Stewie 2K definitely wanted to move across to the team. It looks to be a done deal. What do you think about this one? Because, I got to say, I was really shocked, and it's not like a like-for-like swap. Taco goes out, we've said, versatile guy, can do the support, can be an entry fragger, whatever you want. Stewie 2K, I feel, is a guy that you've definitely got to give him the room to do what he does, and it's his play style it's very reminiscent of Fur, even Cold Zero-esque as well. There's certain elements that are the same. So I thought in terms of overall team balance, I don't know how I feel about it, but I will certainly say, just in terms of it being another one of these fantastic all-star lineups, it's a very exciting prospect. You're going to enjoy watching them, because if all of these guys go off simultaneously, well, there's nothing you can do. It's sort of like FaZe in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I did a video on this yesterday, I basically, one of my things I say in it is, I'm not really feeling this move. I don't really see it as an obvious move that's going to be good. I will say, there is the context that right now, obviously, the scene's wide open, because obviously FaZe can't win a fucking tournament, but gets every semi, and they've just lost a player anyway. So right now, it's new people winning tournaments all the time. So definitely, this is enough talent to win. That's certain. But if I look stylistically, yeah, I agree. It just the roles just don't make sense. Say what had happened instead was one of those moves we heard about from behind the scenes, Fur maybe wants to retire. Now, if you tell me you're getting Stewie 2K and he's replacing Fur, I'd say, right, yeah, we'll have to tweak some things, but hey, this has potential. There's room for him to grow as a player, become a dominant The problem is, though, for me, I look at Stewie 2K and this just looks like when they brought Phelps in, which, one of the problems they clearly had was, they already had Cold Zero and Fur. So there's not really a lot of space to give you all the resources that you want and give you all the room you want and do what you want. Now, Phelps held it together for quite a while and did pretty well from that. They won a bunch of tournaments, but you could tell it was never 100% comfortable with that player. So that's my concern with putting Stewie 2K in here is, I don't really know how you sort of, on the one hand, give him room to be himself, which is where he's shown the most success individually. But on the same time, how do you then work him into that SK system, which has been a system? For me, one of the stupidest elements of fans trash talking, who are fans of SK, is when they trash talk as though SK was this mega dominant team that smashes all the opponents. What games have you been watching? They're the fucking Patriots. Where there's that stat where the Patriots never won a Super Bowl by more than 5 points or something. mental like that. That's what SK Gaming is like when they win. They win because they're the most clutch down the stretch. They don't blow anyone out the water. That almost never fucking happens ever. So what's mad is that is a core strength that team had over its rivals, over the FaZe clans of the world. So if you go instead away from that and you make them a more skilled lineup, cool, you can still win, but you've lost something that to me was essential in SK, was that insane ability to play off each other and to seemingly always be comfortable, even when you're in tough spots, and to do comebacks. That some of that I think does go away when you lose Taco and when you add Stewie 2K. And so I think you become more like, as you're saying, these teams that are high skilled and they're playing off skill, and there's, you know, it's like we've got just enough team play to win with these star players.
Yeah. Well, actually, just to what's been going on while we've been doing the show, because obviously we're starting to get back to, you know, having some Counter-Strike online and stuff. Cloud9 and SK Gaming had their first game with Stewie going out and Skadoodle standing in. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But it was a pretty, you know, if this is how you introduce yourself to the fans, he's had a fucking Western Supermare. Like, you know, it's like, as a Newcastle football fan, I've seen this a bunch of times. It was like when we signed Marcelinho, if you remember that useless bag of shit. He was a $6.5 million defender we got from fucking Mallorca, I think it was. And everyone was like, oh, he's brilliant, great on the ball. He played about fucking 4 times, you know, like maybe 8 times. He was absolute garbage. So there was a lot of anticipation around this. Stu's had a bit of a nightmare in the first instance. He's gone, you know, it's only one map, so obviously let's not go ham. But he went 7 for 17 against his old employers, and Cloud9 smashed him 16-6. So, again, I don't know. Maybe it's like you're saying, this system's going to fucking take some time to iron out, right? And
obviously, it's both sides of the equation. So the other part, and this is something that I am very interested to watch, is I want to see what Coldzera is like in a world where there is no Taco. There's no one, because that guy, I've always said this in every discussion we've ever had, right? Okay, so there was actually an episode of that one where those Canadian players do it called Peaker's Advantage, where like FNS, fucking Semphis, Davey.
Sick podcast. After this, after this podcast, it's the next best CS podcast.
Yeah. I mean, you notice it takes 5 of them to have a simple discussion that we have with 2 people, but you know, not everyone's like
can't have everything.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the
Galactic mind.
One of the points I made when I was on there is we had the discussion, which back then was a lot more of like an open discussion. It wasn't like now, where it was like, who's better, Coldzera, Simple, Nico? And I made the point to them that where have Nico and Simple got a bloke like Taco? Just helping them all the time, playing with them, going in front of them, playing with them in a site, setting them up. No one's doing any of that shit for them. They can do that, as we've seen with Simple and Nico, in any team. You could put them in fucking Dynasty female and put them and they hard carry in exactly the same fashion. I've never seen Coldzera do that, because all the time I've seen Coldzera at the top, except when he first joined the team, and I'll give him a break there. When he first joined Luminosity, admittedly, he was a very inexperienced player, so I won't judge him on that. But if I think of most of his career when he was at its peak, it was all with Taco. So I want to see what happens because, again, it doesn't have to be much. If it's even 5% comes off his game, you just made it harder to win.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's going on over at Cloud9.
Oh, by the way, I'll drop a topic in the group chat, so we can just cover this later. But there was a detail in here, I don't know if you saw it, that is outrageous that we have to cover later.
Go on then, let's have a look. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just going to make sure we're going to get...
No, I like it. You finally contributed something to the writing of the show. Thanks.
I have never, ever contributed a topic ever. It's true.
It's only been like about 3 fucking years. So yeah, thanks, Duncan. That's great. So anyway, let's talk about what's going on over at Cloud9.
Fucking train wreck.
Yeah, well, it's maybe.
Richard, all you need to know is this. I've fallen into this trap many, many times, my friend. Many times. Okay. You never, when you're looking at roster moves, when someone says, what do you think of that move? Unless you instantly say, it's great, I'm looking forward to it. If you go, I could see how it could work. No, fucking hell, I'm already out. I'm out immediately. I don't want to... yeah, maybe. And if that could. I got it right. Totally rule it out. Like,
as you did the spoiler, FNS has joined Cloud9, and Semphis actually tweeted something out saying, "Lol, they think you're going to be the caller."
I think he's trolling there.
Yeah.
Come on, right. Semphis, you can't troll me, mate.
Yeah, right. But you did do a video. I know it was with a different lineup.
Yes.
But So this puts you in a hard spot because on the one hand, I know your fucking ego loves being right. You go, see, I told you FNS was the answer all along. But on the other hand, you were talking about another lineup and you're saying FNS is an unspectacular pickup. So you've either got to be wrong in the past to be right now, or you're going to be fucking right then and wrong now.
This is the problem I have with this move, is that when I made the video, they were not major champions. They were a team which had never even made top 8 at a major with that core. They were a team hoping to qualify for majors, and where a good performance would have been a semi-final. I mean, they had one final, which was they made that ESL1 Cologne one where they got kind of something of a helpful bracket. But okay, they did make the final. They weren't a team with massive expectations. And in fact, behind the scenes, as you might have seen in my automatic interview, things weren't great. They were having a lot of arguments, and in fact, arguments about how to play the game. So in that team setting, I've already said this publicly. I've said it on the show. I told them publicly, sign FNS, because that's the most easy fit to me to get a real in-game leader. And then I said privately, which I've also revealed, sign fucking Hunden. I was even willing to go to that level because I just wanted them to have an actual in-game leader to make more out of the players they had. Because to me, they had one of those teams where they had all this talent and they weren't making use of it. I will say, though, one key point I did make in that video was one of the reasons I wanted them to sign FNS back then is because I seeing as for whatever reason they won't cut Skadoodle, he apparently just had to leave of his own volition. I thought that he is someone, when I saw how he used JDM, who might actually be able to utilize Skadoodle instead of them doing what they've done the last 3 years, which is, haha, we all play scrimmy and you're just stood over in that corner watching an angle doing nothing. You know, that doesn't work for anyone, as every fan has told me. So I wanted someone that would help in that scenario. The problem is now, I agree, if you look at their options, this probably is the best option. I can't really see who they're going to get. But the problem is, that just can't sit right with me when you've just won a major, when you've just re-upped a bunch of players, when you've just sold Stewie 2K, and what all you got was the money, and you can't use the money to do anything with it. That's where it's a bit underwhelming, you know. And then we know, I mean, we don't technically know who the fifth's going to be still, but it's not going to be anyone amazing, is it? It's not going to be Elige or Twists or Naf. It's not going to be some sick European player. So, unfortunately, this has to feel like an underwhelming roster to me.
Yeah, okay. So, FNS for me, like, again, I think they definitely needed, like Tarek was doing well, but the problem Tarek always has is like this. It's like Tarek doesn't really get very far into the alphabet. He comes up with a plan A. Plan A's sick, right? But as we all know, plan A don't really work. And Tarek is the kind of in-game leader because he's new to it. Definitely could come up with a plan B. Plan B's not as good, but Tarek is the kind of in-game leader who, once you've exhausted A and B, he will literally turn around and go, I am out of ideas. I need you guys to help lead this team tactically by committee. And unfortunately, that isn't the roster to do that with. And this has been one of the areas where Cloud9 has been a little bit one-dimensional. Their tactics do rely a lot on, let's have some aggression, take control of some maps, hit our shots, and it's all going to be fine. Let's do a really good blunt force execute onto a site, you know, like, for example, on Mirage, where they have some fucking awesome coordinated pushes. But then if none of that's working, if another team is anti-stratted them or just has their number or stylistically plays something that's very disruptive and will not allow you to do that, Tarek will be like, guys, anyone got any input? That's his fate.
Does anyone know that smoke for gravy? Never mind then. Right, you know, like in FPL, slow B. Yeah, but what do you do when we get there? Just go slow B. Contact players. That's the thing they always say.
Yeah, contact
player. Contact.
Yeah, like, we'll do
that's
a
not just a
player.
universal strategy, you know, to just go.
Yeah. Contact. We'll walk up and we'll shoot with them. Contact. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But yeah, you know, and like, I love Tarek. I'm one of his biggest fans. I think he's definitely got a place on this fucking roster, right? But for sure, I think FNS is a little bit more cerebral. Now, hopefully, he's got some time to stop laughing just because I said cerebral, mate. Yeah, I know you're cerebral. I know with Moses.
Yeah. Listen, I like Tarek. He's a fun guy, but it's the guy where I want him to be sitting in the game going, fucking hell, would you look at that hedge? Basically, I want him doing the James Banks role. I don't want it. Fucking guy thinking up the whole plan. Napoleon, how are we going to get out of this one? Send the 4th division. Like, fuck, you know? I wouldn't even be able to take him seriously when I'm looking down the line.
Oh, it's going to happen like that, dog. No.
Put the smokes in. Get paid to do this for a living. You're like, imagine being like the entry fragger in that team.
I know. It's going to be rough. But anyway, so the other part that's happened, I mean, like, I thought you'd be sat here grinning like a fucking Cheshire Cat for a different reason, because bizarrely, Skadoodle has announced that he's going to go inactive. And what's strange about it is, it does seem to have come from sort of nowhere, because you could see from the reaction of players on social media and on their personal streams that they were like pretty taken aback by it. It wasn't like some fucking low-key secret everybody knew. So it has kind of come a little bit out of left field. I don't think necessarily it's a Cloud9 decision. I could be wrong about that, but it certainly looks to a certain degree that Scar's taken the decision into his own hands to sort of step down. Now, this is the interesting thing. He's not going to another team.
Which tells me.
Yeah, he's going completely inactive and might never play again, which is, I don't know, it just seems so wild to go from what was clearly your highest point. Like, not only did you win a major as somebody that has massively underperformed for 4 years, you finally get a major, and you actually contributed to that victory in a major by playing sick, and it's now, just as the wheels start to come off the team, you decide to go inactive, as if this would in any way make sense while you were in the middle of a renaissance in your career, and in fact have actually hit your career peak.
Look how other scenes around the world have brought up talent and second and third best teams. So in Denmark, the Dignitas team never did any massive thing until they got Cajun B, till they got Rubino. Then you look elsewhere in Brazil. Yes, we had people like Steel and Bolts get cut and then go and bring up the Immortals crew and bring talent through there and become better players themselves and get back nose to the grind and have to work their way back up. I'm getting so sick of this in NA where it's like, oh yeah, Shroud and Skadoodle, oh, let's just play until the bitter end, when literally even our best friends are like, get him the fuck out of here, I can't win, and then just retire. So what you're basically saying at the end when you retire is, yeah, I was shit, but I was fooling you all for years. Right, I'm off now, see ya. Sound, well, you obviously love the game of Counter-Strike. Oh no, you just love money, do you? You just love fucking mammon, do you? You
What the fuck, dude? Like, I'm trying to God, like,
I'll admit I was just for the love. I don't really.
You're unreal. You're unreal when it's dude. As if that guy had like fucking loves money overall. Like,
fucking hell.
But like, real talk. I don't know if he's just maybe had enough. Like, maybe he's thought in his own mind. It probably doesn't get better than that. And you know, one of the things that he's always done is always played with teams that, you know, really like him and are like, yeah, he's a great guy and we're never going to cut him and stuff. And maybe he knows in his own mind that it's like, yeah, we're probably never going to win a major again. We're struggling right now. I might be part of that problem. And, I wanted to hang in there and win a major, which, by the way, you always love existence for. So maybe he's just thought, fuck it, now is the time to just get out. I've made a lot of money out of the game. I can maybe be a streamer. People will like and support me, because he's that kind of personality. He's really quiet and unassuming. Some people tend to gravitate towards that. So I don't know. It seems like just a really strange move that came out of left field. Not so much that he leaves Cloud9, just that he goes completely inactive.
That's why I say it tilts me. Like, here's the thing. If he really is a guy where he did still enjoy playing in Cloud9, or maybe I think he's the one who's implied that he just liked to play as a pro. Like, I think he even admitted he doesn't practice much, etc. Okay, why not just go and play for NRG or something? You'll still make a pretty good salary. By the way, more salary than he used to make 3 years ago. You'll still make a good living. You'll go to some tournaments. And not only that, actually, it'll probably be better for you because you'll only have to go to tournaments, every 2 or 3 months. You'll play in the minor. You'll play in some of the smaller lands. You still get to have a career. I doubt you're going to make it back to the top, but it's something,
Yeah. Obviously, Circuit NRG, don't think Skadoodle's going to supplant him, but I get your point. So look, here's the other thing. Skadoodle going inactive means they need an AWPer. Skadoodle is kindly sort of standing in for them at the moment, which is the games that they played, that they won against SK that we showed you earlier. Nothing confirmed on stream. I don't know if it was deliberate or, whatever. But he did say that JDM looks to be joining Cloud9. Now, my initial reaction when I heard this news, and it's been reported about JDM going in for Cloud9, is it's like in my head, I think it's an upgrade, but not without its own problems, right? Like Like JDM is a guy that kind of went a little bit missing towards the end of his Team Liquid tenure. Finally, when they started playing well, like they had that run at the Summit, I believe it was, and that was when he got dropped, right? Just when they made it, just when they won the Summit over Cloud9, and he said, "Yep, I'll see you all at Katowice." Nah, you won't, mate. You're donezo. So I think he's a better offer than Skadoodle.
It's just so ludicrous, though, isn't it?
Yeah. I think he's a better roper than Skadoodle, but his rifling is still terrible, and Scar's actually a competent rifler. So it's like win some, you lose some. Yeah. He's not coming in at a time where his stock is necessarily particularly high, and it's not like such an upgrade you would go, oh, brilliant, Cloud9 are going to be okay. The fact that it's only just a little bit of an upgrade for me, and I'm sure there's people who would argue it's a downgrade, it doesn't really... Like, you still see the void of Stewie 2K when you look at this 5, for sure. Well, what do you make of JDM?
I mean, the part that makes so little sense about it is, like, I will say there's the caveat that if they do bring him in, obviously he has history with FNS. So, okay, fair enough. FNS got the best out of him, as I alluded to. I think he might have even been able to do something with Skadoodle. But it is just such a stupid move, though, isn't it? Because it's like if I said, say I'm a wrestling promoter, oh, tragedies hit Rich. Andre the Giant, he's fucking died, hasn't he? So we've lost him. But the thing is, towards the end anyway, a lot of his athleticism had gone, and he didn't have the best on mic personality and a lot of things. So I've replaced him. Welcome to Big Show. It's the same cunt. It's the same person. You fucking idiot.
I don't know. I don't think Big Show holds a candle to Andre the Giant, but maybe that's nostalgia.
You know what I mean, though. It's like it is the same.
Yeah. You just got a big man. Like, yeah, I get it. All right. Well, okay.
Imagine being one of the fucking kids who has to sleep in a bedroom near where I am right now doing this show.
It's the same.
I know. That's all you hear through the wall.
I know. Well,
Mummy, what was that about a cunt? Sorry, son. He's just got his lease for a few years, hasn't he? And again, just like Sado, lad, I'll never leave. It's in my mission.
Right. While we're talking about underwhelming bullshit, right? So we're always talking about FaZe, dude. Like straight, always talking about FaZe. I know. You're gonna get this. Is
everything
tilted you.
Gets worse, doesn't it? Everything just gets worse. What's next? One of my sisters come home. Like for me, exist as well. Sound fighting. I hate short Swedish people.
Oh, dude, I can't. Right. Anyway, so we were talking about FaZe needing to make some changes probably because they had a winning problem. Like first they were choking in finals, now it seems they're choking in semi-finals. Something wasn't quite right, and we were like, well, who's going to go? You've got two options for me. You have got to get rid of either Carrigan and say we're going to get a new in-game leader and he's going to make our 4-star players work somehow, and the marketplace for really good in-game leaders is very thin on the ground. Or you have to replace one of your stars and say, we can definitely get an upgrade. And that would be Olaf Meisters. He was the one that was really underperforming, So they went away, and Olaf Meister, I mean, and I will add this, like, I hope it's nothing serious because I'd feel like a prick. But obviously, at the height of all of these problems, Olaf Meister has had some issues and had to stand down. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. Either the issues sort of were actually leading towards some of the issues in the team, which I can't rule out because I don't know what they are, or it's like one of those like convenient, I just need some personal time. In other words, I just got to get away.
Which is one of the reasons I hate the fact that people always soft sell it like that, because we never know when it's a real thing.
Yeah, that's like, what I mean.
Yeah, no one would want to say something like, "Oh, I'm glad he's caught." If he actually has some like mad family emergency or something, exactly. But every player for the last 3 years is of their own volition focused on school or taking personal tests. Like you've been caught, haven't you?
Yeah. So Olaf going out the team was probably the only other way it could go. So you're like, this is great. You're FaZe. You're the all-star lineup, right? You've got spending power. You got money. You got fucking status. You were just in the final of a major. You're pretty much guaranteed a route to almost any final, it seems. You just can't seal the deal. Who wouldn't want to join that team? You can have your pick of players. and they announced on April fucking Fool's Day, by the fucking way, they announced Exist. Now, let's be clear. Exist was a player that was sort of out there dangling, linked Cloud9 maybe as a stand-in or something, supposedly.
Obviously would have been in Fnatic.
Yeah, Fnatic, that fell through, was going to replace Golden. Now is in FaZe.
An even better team than all of them.
Yeah. I don't get it. I don't get what...
It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, but I mean, it's mad, isn't it? Like again, I don't want to kick fucking Richard. I think he's a competent player, and I think he's a terrible in-game leader, but and veto and tactical mind. But I think when he wants to turn on the fragging ability, he can definitely do that. His problem at NIP was always he was caught betwixt two fucking worlds, and therefore you never saw the best of either. One, he could never really achieve in. The other, he can definitely be a good player and a fragger. He definitely can. But the problem you've got here is, he's been so past his prime for so long, the idea that you slot him straight into a top team and it's going to fucking work is ludicrous. The idea as well that there wasn't better options. Like, if it is only a temporary measure, just take a chance. There's plenty of fucking other talent out there. You don't even need to spend big to get some of it, probably. Why not? And when you consider there was even talk of like Automatic going out of Cloud9 at one point, maybe going to SK Gaming with Stewie. If I'm FaZe, I'm picking up the phone for something like that. I'm not necessarily thinking who's in free agency right now. Oh, it's Exist. With that logic, you could have gone for fucking Freiburg or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are we saying it means to play for FaZe? There's an interesting part to this as well. I know historically Exist has never really rated Carrigan as an in-game leader. So there's another.
What's hilarious is, people don't know that context, right? So everyone who followed CS for at least the last 3 years knows that the infamous nemesis of the Danish TSM that Carrigan was in is not the Brazilians or other team, Navi, who's beaten them. It is NIP. And this was most exacerbated towards the end of Carrigan's run, where actually at certain points in time, Astralis was a better team than it, but would still definitely lose them if they ever faced them. And part of that was you had that perfect storm of the team that's always losing. It's totally in their heads that they can't beat this one opponent, so they think they're going to lose. And the team that is going to win, it doesn't matter that they know they're a worse team on some level. They know when they play that team, fuck these guys. They can't hang with us. Like they'll always break. We'll get them to that point. And they really did have that arrogance. By the way, justifiably so. It was working like every single time. But as a result, I know they didn't rate a bunch of those players that were in that team. And obviously now he's going to be playing with one of them, isn't he? As his in-game leader.
Yeah, it's mad. So you're going to take your orders from someone who you've always historically like sort of gone after as being, fucking terrible. He can't, like you say, he can't hang with us. Tell me how to play, sir. Like, fucking hell. How desperate are you to get back in the game? It's mad. So overall, though, what do you think it does to the team? Is that it? Like, is there a conceivable way where Carrigan, in his infinite wisdom, given that he couldn't make a team with Olofmeister on the roster actually win trophies, is there a conceivable way him and Exist and the rest of the roster can get it together and win more trophies moving forward in 2018?
I mean, the ridiculous thing is you do still have fucking Nico, Guardian and Rain in your active lineup. Like, if you have those players, the expectation still should be to win tournaments at a minimum and then possibly be number one in the world. These really should be your expectations. So there's certainly a way it could work. I do agree with you, though. My big problem is I feel like you would have to see something out of Exist that we haven't maybe ever seen. I mean, I've never seen him sort of play the role that he'd probably be required to in this team. Now, I don't think it takes a massive amount of fragging. That's not as much of an issue. But my problem is if I look at their team, counter to the SK example I gave, I actually felt like they're a team who needed to be moving more towards a balanced lineup. Like, they've tried having the best fraggers in the world. That takes you so far, but then for whatever reason, that mix didn't have that extra little oomph that gets you over the hump. So at that point in time, you've got to artificially build that. Like I often have this saying, I should really do a video on this topic one day. The reason why, if you ever look at some amazing teams in games and then you find out that their comms are like people not talking, is because in an ideal world, that would be perfect communication. Perfect communication is where I either already know what you want to do, so you don't need to tell me because it's already in my head, or just something simple you say, because we're so in tune, I can take all sorts of like interpretation. So if you don't have that, which 99% of teams don't, you artificially build it. You build a hierarchy of who the shot caller is. And one of you doesn't talk at certain times so someone else can give a more important call. Or you know that I only give certain types of calls if I'm playing B on Dust 2. I don't just say like every FPL noob, like beep, 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 when I see what. No, you never do it. You know, you have like a hierarchy to artificially build that communication that you don't have. So the big issue there is I feel like that's the end of the equation you want to start moving to if you're Carrigan, not least because just cycling through what you've done already is probably going to get you kicked sooner or later. So it's almost sort of last chance saloon, I feel like, if you're Carrigan. So is this really the way you want to go out in your last few months? You want to try it with Exist? I could sort of see it. Then I have to say, if we're assuming that it's possibly not a massive problem for Olaf Meister, and maybe he has literally either said to them, I want to take a break, or they've said, someone needs to make room, we've got to try something else. Then you are, by the way you phrased it though, still trying to leave it out there that like we could bring him back though in a few months. Like, yeah, he might come back, he might feel better in a few months to come back. So even there, you're sort of admitting like, I'm not willing to go all in on this move in a way. So I feel like everyone involved in this move has to have a bit of like, could work, optimism, positive mental attitude. Like no one really believes in this move. Come on.
Yeah, I think you got to have a bit of PMA about it. Well, look, we're sort of coming up to time, and there was like other topics I had on the fucking list, like the 7-day trading thing, Pasha maybe moving to full-time streaming. Yeah, we'll pick them up next week.
There's one more we're gonna do though, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh look, no, I know you want to fucking take point on it, so you fucking go nuts. So DK, who obviously we know is one of the better investigative reporters in esports and very good in Counter-Strike, published a story basically saying that Na'Vi demanded $1.2 million as a buyout for Simple and Flamey for any interested parties, which would have been the SK Gaming lineup, but not SK Gaming. It would have been the Immortals guys that were basically footing the bill for it. But here's what's mental about it, just in case, because for me, when I saw that, I went, right, so $1 million for Simple, 200 grand for Flamey.
Someone had a joke that was better, Rich. The joke that they tweeted to me was like, it was 1.1 million for Simple, and you have to take Flamey for free. Something like that. That's banter whoever came up with that. It's just some random guy.
Yeah. So,
and the joke being that, they turned, I won't take Flamey, I won't do it like that. That was the joke, obviously.
But here's what's mental about it. According to the details in this report, Na'Vi asked for only $500,000 for Simple's buyout, but 700,000 more.
Yeah.
If they took Flamey.
Already weird, right?
Yeah, very.
That's weirder though. Keep going.
All right, very weird. Well, you chip in. This is your thing.
So here's the thing. Then it said that SK offered them the exact 500k they asked for Simple. There we go. I've met your buyout. No problem. I've got the player. And I'll still give you $500,000 for Flamey. By the way, he's not like Simple, where if you here's why you could turn down the 500k for Simple, because you get to have Simple. If you turn down the 250k for Flamey, first of all, you never see that money again. And secondly, he doesn't provide 250k worth of value for you. So that's like one of the shittest, like the idea that wasn't instantly snapped off at the hand is unreal. And then an extra 100k, just throw 100k in. Just throw $100,000 for no reason in on the deal. And Na'Vi still wouldn't take it. Na'Vi go, how about you just pay 300k more for no reason? And then this is the deal. This is the detail, Rich, that is mental. I'll read it out here.
Yeah, go on.
At that point, Immortals attempted to purchase Simple's contract alone because he had explained to Immortals he was willing to join the team alone, according to sources. This is the key part that is unreal. Na'Vi then claimed it could block the transfer of Simple, even if the full buyout amount was offered. excuse me. And then this is the part. Well, how are you going to block it? It's his buyout, and I'm going to meet his buyout. This is a contract, right? Navi also argued, according to sources, it didn't have to transfer simple immediately because the buyout clause did not state a specific time frame. Isn't that just unreal? That those two parts, that they refused it after you've met the buyout, which is almost like that scenario I've explained before, where the whole reason why like Real Madrid get any player they want is because when you ask the player, like, I want your best player, and you go, I won't sell him. And you go, well, what's the buyout? There's got to be one. And you go, okay, whatever, 80 million. And they go, there's 100. And you go, fuck. Well, I guess I have to sell him. In this scenario, that's like going, there's the 100. I never said I'd sell him this decade. You're just a cunt, aren't you? That's so unreasonable, isn't it?
No, I mean, I'll tell you this, like, especially when you contrast it to the Stewie situation as well, what happened at Cloud9, and indeed FNS at Complexity, right? I mean, Jason Lake could have held on to FNS if he really wanted to, but he put a tweet out after the move saying, we honor buyouts and we will always respect the players' wishes where they want to go, which, again, you talked about earlier in the show, right? Like, it's one of the things that we do almost like a gentleman's agreement within Counter-Strike. If you meet a buyout and a player wants to leave, even if we know you're going to go to a rival and that move might come back and haunt us, we will just honor what players want to do. Sometimes naively so, sometimes it makes sense. But right, I remember on this podcast when we talked about the story, Simple signs 2-year contract for Na'Vi. Alexander, brother, come on. You could reach out to us. Like we could have told you that is the dumbest thing you could ever have done. We said on this show, man.
In this context, one thing I would tell you is you've got them over a barrel, mate. Their team's shit. You're the best player in the world.
Yeah.
If you sign that contract, how about putting the buyout that's going to be? How about putting that buyout applies to the non-human universe and a time frame of the time of the contract? You know, put in basic things that would actually protect you. Because in that scenario, he had all the leverage. Obviously, they'd say yes to that, right?
Yeah, and this is what I mean. Like, you know, you're the best player in the world, right? Sure, but $500,000, that's supposedly what Nico's valuation was. Although I don't know if the full amount got paid because of some other sort of, you know. Yeah. But like basically right now, Simple is the best player in the world. I don't think we'll see an individual on that level that he's at right now for some time. He should be playing in the top team and should be winning trophies. And when he signed for 2 fucking years, it was the dumbest thing he could have fucking done. Because I will tell you, Na'Vi, you never did right. A little bit of history here, and you can verify this. Na'Vi as an organization are one of the fucking greediest, most fortunate organizations that have ever fucking existed. Do not think that this is an organization that has built itself up through hard sweat and work and tears and grind. They are not comparable to a Complexity that have hung in there for years. They are not comparable to even an SK Gaming, right? Na'Vi were a fucking team that were in 1.6 were funded by a Kazakhstani gas magnate who went by the name of Arbalet. I can find you an article so you can learn all about him. And what he wanted was to unify the CIS region and completely bankroll one of the best teams of all time. And inherent within that organization, they even publicly said, you choose what to name us. And fucking Avatar was out at the time. So they came up with the Na'Vi abbreviation, but cleverly, obviously, you get to say Natus Vincer, which means born to win, right? So they did all of this, and and it was just bankrolled money. They had a salary that eclipsed most European, North American players, and crucially, in terms of where they lived regionally, it was a salary per month that people didn't make in a fucking year.
It was one of the best in the world,
right? So zero gravity and all the management of Na'Vi hitched themselves to that wagon, cut themselves nice big checks, nice big salaries, right? And they were just living off that team. Now, that team went on to make the most prize money in a single year since Ninjas in fucking pajamas in 2004 or whatever it was. I think it was in 2003.
2003.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, you're right. It was SK Gaming. And they did it in like 2010. Yes. And all the while, these managers were taking cuts of that prize money.
Oh, there's another detail as well, Rich.
jump
so
in.
Think of the timeline. So 2010, basically a millionaire says, oh, I'm going to pay this player, legendary player from the region, to make it the best team. So you have nothing to do with it. He's doing it all. I'm going to pay for you to start your org. I'm going to pay him all the salaries. I'm going to pay all the sponsorships and stuff. And in the meanwhile, get some sponsors because eventually I won't pay anymore. So you do that and you lock into instantly winning all the majors, set the prize money record. Next year, a game called Dota 2 comes out.
Yes,
and Dota 2 comes out and you get a team. Again, you didn't construct a team. You didn't pick the players. You didn't tell the players, pick this guy. Your team just happens to win the first international, which is $1 million. Again, you are taking cuts of prize money alone, which is more than you ever invested into the players. Basically, you have a lottery ticket and then you trip over and find another lottery ticket for the next year. And then beyond that, they keep having all these. So by the time you ever have to do any of the things a normal org does, you've already made you're minted. You've already got everything.
Yeah, and you have to understand, off the back of that international win, because TI, $1 million sounds almost like fucking chicken feed now, doesn't it, right? But back then, it was the biggest shit ever. And that Dendy-driven team basically put Na'Vi on the map as a serious international global contender within esports, and all the while,
by the way, famously they never went into League of Legends. I think in StarCraft they might have had a player, but if it was some like super low level. They never had players in these other games that were big. You know, there would have been like Astralis is now, or one org that's one team, and if that team goes shit, you're dead tomorrow.
Yeah, and then of course it's not like they just won one TI. They
placed finals of the next two.
Yeah, they placed finals of the next two. So they got huge. Meanwhile, the prize pool was fucking exponentially increasing each year as the Dota 2 international crowdfunding phenomenon come off, which completely changed the game in esports, the business model. They made more money, didn't they, for finishing fucking second the next year than they did for winning it the first year.
I think the next 2 years were the same money. I think it was maybe like 3 or TI.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it was TI. It was TI 3 where finishing second got them 650,000. It was mental. So all the while the manager just cut. I'll be taking some of that. That money, it's not like it got fucking reinvested. It's not like they went out and then picked up a League of Legends team and expanded in other things. Where did all this spending go? And then you think about how Na'Vi fucking started to drop off in Dota and drop off in other games, right? And then in Counter-Strike, they've had some fucking absolute really shoddy lineups, just placeholder teams. They finally get to a position where you'll notice, using some of the old 1.6 talent, they actually managed to construct a team with young players in it and get back on the map and be well respected, and somehow acquired the greatest piece of talent, right? And sure, when we talk about KNG style toxic assets, at one point Simple definitely was one. And here they are now, sitting on the best player in the world, who has expressed his interest to leave, has had talks with a team to leave. That team has met the buyout, which is extortionate. They've even offered you a second extortionate buyout to buy a player that is nowhere in any fucking universe worth close to that buyout.
And who they don't really want, let's be real.
And they don't even give a fuck about. They've also offered you just 100 grand. I wonder who's getting that, by the way. Yeah, I wonder what that's really for. Management fee, admin fee, is it, mate? Yeah, you fucking tell me the details of the deal. Put it out publicly then.
By the way,
that's been reported on.
Shout out to whoever involved in this deal purposely leaked that detail to really just show what the Na'Vi management's like. And we were going to even throw 100k in. For what though? What would the buyout be? Just, then, 100k leaves my account, it enters your account. Who knows?
And while this has gone on, by the way, we're missing out, obviously, one of the more killer fucking parts of the detail. Na'Vi's image and media rights bought by ES Force for allegedly the fee of $10 million to have the right to market them in the CIS region. It was ownership all along. But they had to pretend that it wasn't. Allegedly, it was ownership all along. Right? $10 million. I can't handle it. So you've already got that money in the bank. Right? You've already got all of that.
So it's only like 9 simples, though.
Yeah. Right? Do you know what I mean?
20 simples, technically. My mistake.
Oh, fuck me.
By the way, I love this ending to the thing as well. Yeah. So it says, right? Remember, it says before. I'll give you the basic, quick version of what happened here. So SK Gaming says to Simple, will you come and join our team? I think we'll be a really good team. Simple goes, I will, but the thing is, I'm not comfortable about leaving Europe unless I take someone with me from the region. So can we bring Flamey? And they go, well, we'll see if we can make the deal work. So they go, they agree to Simple's buyout. They give a really good offer for Flamey. SK goes, nah, we want like 600K for Flamey. You go, fuck it. This is unreasonable. Then Simple goes, look, I'll tell you what, if you just pay for me, I'll come on my own. So they go, sound, okay, well, we'll pay for your buyout. There we go, there's a 500K. Then Navi goes, nah, we're not doing it. So then Immortals goes, like, listen, you've said you'll come, we're going to pay, just tell them to make the deal happen. And then it just says at the end, and the following day, Simple told Immortals the deal wasn't going to happen because he wanted to stay with Navi.
Yeah, I know.
Did they do him in that room for 24 hours before that fucking deal?
Mate, it was like he fucking tweeted out yes when it was all speculated he was going to leave. Like fucking, what's it called? Daniel fucking Bryan. Yes, I'm out of Navi. Like he fucking was tweeting that he was gone. He was over the Green Hills and fucking far away. I'll tell you what happened. They've literally said, I don't even want to do the accent. I'm going to sound like John Malkovich in fucking Rounders. You know what I mean? So it's simple. You understand that we can hold this contract over you any way we like. So you take Flamey. We not like the Flamey. You take Flamey. You know, what the fuck's going on? They're fucking just straight fucking holding him in place with a buyout being met on the fucking basis that we don't have to let you go in a set time frame. Of course you do. Get a fucking lawyer, someone, please. This is fucking criminal. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. They're one of the wealthiest orgs in the fucking world for doing nothing, and now the guy who's behind it all is involved in fucking cryptocurrency.
You know, my favorite part, by the way, is that line that says Navi then informed Immortals that if Immortals wanted to purchase Simple now, Immortals could have him in July. Right, wait a second. I think people are going to miss a subtlety of that story. They're going to miss it's I know it's all out in black and white, but they're going to miss this detail. They didn't say come back and buy him in July. They said, like the opposite, you know those deals where you buy a carpet or a fucking car and you no money down now, pay it all there. It's the opposite. You pay them the money now, you don't even get the car. They go, come back in 6 months, we'll give you the car. Why would I do that deal? That makes no sense at all.
No,
it's all so the bad. Money down now, no product.
It's so bad. It's like we made the joke when he signed the 2-year contract and he said, I am so happy to be in Navi. You were like, where's the guy with the fucking Kalashnikov off camera? Well, now there's two guys. Fucking, I know, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Anyway, look, we got to wrap up the show. It's already been a long one today, so let's fucking end this nonsense. Just before we do, we got a quick question from one of our $100 patrons, a guy called Ruxon, one of the new guys up there in the top patron slot, keeping us afloat. As NIP is right now, they still don't seem to find a lot of success. Exist and Freiburg were part of the core four and had issues of their own. But was their leaving enough to bring this team back on track as a top team contender? Is it maybe time? Hang on. What? Is it maybe time for Forest or Get Right to step down too at some point? And who could replace them from the Swedish scene? That's Ruxon's question. I don't think I'll jump right in. I don't think it's time for Forest or Get Right to retire or step down. You will notice, of course, Get Right has been statistically on a downward trajectory for some time. It's a bit disingenuous to say that it's just because he can't hang, because over that time he's had, life changes, he's had health problems, and I still think the Get Right in 2018 is actually better than a lot of fucking players in the top tier teams out there in terms of what he brings and everything else. Forrest actually is a player that the time to have gone would have been probably at a point last year. Actually, how he's playing right now, he's very often one of the top fraggers on the team. If Rez and Draken are having their problems, you'll usually see Forrest be the one to step up. So he can obviously still hang, even though he is pushing 30. Now, obviously, these players will not fucking play forever. Is there anybody that can hold a candle to them in the Swedish scene right now? I don't know, but Sweden has done a terrible job of handling its youth, a terrible job of keeping teams together. And the players that I think are universally talented and can be appreciated on a profound level. They're guys like Twist, and Twist has got some sort of mental block that'll stop him being on a team like this and playing to the best of his ability. He is another pro who is content to waste his career. So what can you do about that? He's one of the most talented Swedish players you've got, and he just doesn't give a fuck about that. He's going to just play on these dog shit teams till it's over for him, and then he'll probably look back and regret it. So I don't think they need to stand down, and I don't think there's any ready-made replacements.
No, I mean, the big problem here is, again, you have to look at the context of where the team is at right now. Where the team is at right now, it's a bit like when Virtus Pro's in this bad spot. Another reason why I feel like what's the point in removing Pasha is because he's actually he's not the worst player in the team, and he has by far the biggest name. So if you hung on to him for this long, why throw him away at the end when he's all you've got? Like, it's the same thing with Get Right and Forest. If you kick out Get Right or Forest, well, first of all, half the appeal of being a Nip fan's gone. You know, I mean, we know they're at the end of their rope, but people are still fans of those players. Then you got to add in, there's not really that many players you get who are better than them, not least because the ones who prove themselves to be better have already passed Nip by. It's Lekro. He's already over in Fnatic. It would be getting someone like a Crims when Fnatic broke up and bring him to your org. You didn't do any of these moves, so it's probably too late. So if you really have to go down and scrape and get beginners, I don't know that it'd be that big of an upgrade. Like, I don't know if the gamble's worth it. I agree. If you look at the context I always used to use about Nip, which is the reason why people who were fans of theirs thought I was too harsh on them. If you go back to 2015 and 2016, that's because at the time, I still felt like there was time to pivot and save some of the team players you had, but get an up-and-coming player and get back to the top and become number one again. Now, that is just off the table now. It's utterly unreasonable to expect it. So in a world where Nip is who they are now, I don't really know what the point is. I'd still just give this lineup a bit more time and then just, if you have to make some harsh cut, you have to make some harsh cut. But if you've looked at Get Right and Forest, I get the feeling that they're in the scenario like you see with Skadoodle, where odds are they could punch their own ticket on the way out. Now, no one's cutting them at this point if they haven't been cut already.
Sure. And then one more question. Should be a nice, easy one. It's from Detlef Insomniac, another one of our $100 patrons. So if you donate $100, you get to ask questions on the show. What do you think about Simple to FaZe instead of Olaf Meister? Again, I'll field that real quick. I think, obviously, Simple's the kind of player that he's just so good. He transcends the idea of roles. I
mean, it's Simple to any team makes sense for that team. Whether it makes sense for Simple's different, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, he's not a player that you need to worry about. Like if you were sorely lacking a support player and that was the reason you didn't get Simple, you're just fucking stupid and shouldn't be running a team. Simple is a guy that will come into a team and will just hard carry. Like I say, Cold Zero 2016 was at an amazing level. The Simple we've seen so far this year, there is nobody that comes close to being able to touch him. It is outrageous. And when you look at the players he's doing it around, when you've got to carry the likes of Edward, who's just ran out and fucking died with all his utility for the umpteenth time because his decision-making process is fundamentally broken. Zeus, who couldn't hit the fucking broadside of a fucking barn. You know, Simple is carrying these people and actually getting them tournament runs by dropping 40 fucking kills every game. So obviously it would make sense to any roster, FaZe or otherwise. And sure, I think him being on FaZe lineup would probably put them back to number one quite comfortably and definitely get them some tournament wins. But looks like it's never going to happen because Na'Vi are just straight Godfather in that fucker. Yeah,
basically. I mean, here's the thing. The second you put him on FaZe, we've got to have some hard conversations, but they're not about Simple, obviously, because the first thing we're doing is, in fact, this actually just, if anything, isn't FaZe the best example of how good this guy is? Even in a team that's probably the most skill stacked we'd ever seen, if I get Simple and I'm FaZe, I go like this. Right, here's my whiteboard. I'm wiping everyone's name off. I'm writing Simple at the top, and I'm going, right, there's my star player. All the rest of you can volunteer to say what role you want to play, but he's the star player. Oh, sorry, Nico, you're really good, actually. In fact, mate, you might be the third best player in the entire world, but we've got the best player now. So you're a second star. Oh, the Guardian, you're actually really fucking... Again, I've already got these spots taken. That's what you'd have to do. That's how good the guy is. He's so outrageously good. And then you add in that he's played with Team Liquid, so we know he can play outside the CIS region. But yeah, every team in the world almost should be bidding for this guy. Like, if I hear these stories, I'm not joking. If I'm right, okay, SK maybe they've decided not to do it. By the way, here's an interesting detail I've just realised I didn't bring up. In their announcement of Stewie 2K, they announce him as their temporary fifth, so they could still get Simple in July.
Interesting.
I hadn't thought of that, but that is one, because you always have to be careful of the wording they use on that sort of thing, because they, they'd be more sure if they were going to do it. But anyway, if I'm any of these teams, except a team like, Fnatic will only have Swedish people, G2 will only have French, Belgian people, except those sorts of teams, everyone should be bidding for Simple, because if you can get him, like, basically, that would not be your problem. Your problem would be elsewhere in your team, and you'd actually have something fixed, maybe more so than you have now. Because as I say, I'd rather have Simple than Nico, as great as Nico is,
Yeah. Right then. So there we go. Just quickly before we bounce, Casper Ruggadu is the former coach of North. He's an ex-Danish player, super cool guy. Did a lot of good work in North, and then bizarrely seemed to be out for reasons I don't really understand at this moment in time. But anyway,
just Gabby betraying him or something.
classic betrayals. But anyway, he's now out of his contract and available, for coaching work. And if guys like fucking Peacemaker are out there getting work, guys like Casper should be walking into fucking top tier jobs. He's a fucking really good coach, really good dude. Anybody that watches
as if
the
you
podcast,
just fired a shot at Peacemaker there.
I'll do what the fuck I want. I'll do what the fuck I want on my show, son. Fuck that guy. Destroy your Chinese dreams. I won't have it. You don't destroy the Chinese dreams where I'm from. Fuck that guy. Anyway, so if you watch the show and you're in the professional circuit and you want a coach, a very high level coach for your team, get in touch with him on Twitter at KazDua. You'll find him. He is a quality guy. Anyway, thanks to all of the people that make the podcast possible. That's $100 patrons: Detlef Insomniac, Chris Enwin, Hyolu Ruxon, and Jerky's Minion. Our $50 patrons: the Archangel Vero, Carter, Daniel Plamanov Yordanov, Vexi, Nostradamus, Andreas Snazor Westerlund, Marcus Kyunpa, Madsen, Mama Jamma Hennessy, Keith Miller, Benakagi Assassin, and William Southern. That was by the numbers. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care of yourselves.